Chapter 2405. An abnormal soul-tracking spell. The Firmament Stone had tasked Gu Shijio to set up the most secured array formation possible using stones. No one would be able to break into this fortress, and Gu Shijio was finally able to utilize her mastery in this craft fully. Consequently, the three gentlemen found themselves isolated outside of the array formation. No one was allowed to enter. Zhu Duqing thought he knew a lot about the techniques Gu Shijio used in forming these barriers. To his dismay, he had no clue how to break through the one in front of him. The two guardians felt the same. Equally confused, they could only stare at the array formation without a clue. Inside the formation, Gu Shijio was still wondering what was going on. Was the Firmament Stone playing a prank on her? How could there be such an abnormal soul-tracking spell that required an array formation of such fortitude? She then listened to the explanation from the Firmament Stone about how to find Di Fui. The method that the Firmament Stone had proposed to her was rather exceptional. She was required to sit face-to-face with Di Fui, both completely naked. More accurately speaking, she had to sit in his lap to be as close as she could be with him. The more skin contact, the better. At first, she felt that it was definitely a prank. However, the Firmament Stone kept reassuring her that it was the fastest way to track him down. It even said that she was the only one who could save him, and if she did not act swiftly, she would regret it for the rest of her life. Gu Shijio began to panic as the Firmament Stone continued to tell her more. Fear had completely dominated her ability to think logically. Although, between the mess, she sensed a feeling of familiarity. It was as if she had been through a similar situation many years ago. She must not lose him again, she thought. Therefore, Gu Shijio was determined to do as told. She followed the Firmament Stone's instruction to the last letter. Earlier, Gu Shijio had asked her three comrades to guard the place and made sure that the array formation would not be disrupted. The two guardians agreed promptly, but Zhu Duqing was unimpressed. Gu Shijio had never properly told him how she planned to save Di Fui, so he was not quite certain about leaving her alone with the man. Thus, he offered to stay with her and Di Fui to be their assistant should anything go astray. Gu Shijio certainly did not let him hang around to witness the entire process. But having been familiarized with him, she knew that he would definitely want a clear answer. Unfortunately, she was not able to explain the entire situation to him. Therefore, she decided to send him out using her teleportation technique. When they were out, she reassured him with a pat on the shoulder and said, "Be patient, my disciple. Do as I say, and stay here to guard the place. If you perform well, I will teach you everything you need to know about the facial disguise technique. If not, I will not accept you as my disciple anymore." Zhu Duqing was astonished. However, before he could say anything, Gu Shijio was already gone. She went back into the array formation using her teleportation technique and shut the entrance completely. Zhu Duqing circled the array formation many times but was still unable to gather any clues as to how to escape. Finally, he decided to stop trying and stood patiently with his fan in his hand. Nonetheless, numerous thoughts circled his mind. If it was only a rescue mission, was it necessary to send everyone out? How was she going to save Di Fui? The two guardians noticed his disappointment. Concerned that he would intervene and disrupt the plan set in place by Gu Shijio, they walked up to him and started to distract him with some small talk. After clearing the place, Gu Shijio finally put Di Fui down on a flat surface. She barely saw him sitting so quietly. She had been moving around him a lot, but he did not even move one bit. He still sat in his meditating position with his eyes closed like the jade statue of a Buddha. Inspired by the familiarity of the scene, Gu Shijio could somehow recall the flashback of a jade statue that she once saw in a small pavilion. The vivid image shocked her, as she was usually unable to see the images clearly when she experienced hallucinations, but this time was completely different. She saw that the jade statue and Di Fui looked almost identical. The major difference was their attires. One was in white and another in purple. Chapter 2406. An abnormal soul-tracking spell, 2. Master, do you still remember the steps I explained to you earlier? Do I need to repeat them to you again? The firmament stone was worried, as the steps were rather complicated. Even the firmament stone, which was known to have the storage capacity of a computer, found that the steps were difficult to master. Hence, she did not expect Gu Shijio, who was only a human though smart, to be able to ascertain it in one go. Let's do it this way. When you are working on it, I shall stay with you at all times to guide you through it. The firmament stone was abruptly switched off. Gu Shijio had turned off all of its senses and kept it away in her storage bag. It was a rescue operation, so she was willing to tolerate being naked. Their position was, however, really awkward for her. Although they had slept together once, it was a very long time ago. Furthermore, she was quite a traditional woman, so she still felt that it was not quite right to strip him naked. Moreover, she was still under the impression that he was together with someone else. Di Fui, I am only doing this to save your life. I have to. Please know that I do not mean to take advantage of you in your current condition. Gu Shijio explained herself, though she was unsure if he was able to listen. Di Fui, as before, was completely motionless and unresponsive. If you remain quiet, I will assume that you agree to this, so you cannot come back looking for me to stir any trouble. Determined, she started to take off his robes. His outer robes were loosely designed with special material, making it easy for her to take them off. The real problem was his undershirt, which was tightly fitted, so it became more difficult to take it off when he was in a seated position. It seemed like an impossibility to do so without ripping it off him. While she was taking off his robes, some flashbacks occurred again. In the images, she was trying to take off the robes of a jade statue. My celestial brother, you look nice even without your clothes. Your robes seem nice. Let me wear them. As the flashback continued, she became more surprised. She could see that the incident happened while she was still on Earth, right after she attached her soul to a new body. There was still a large, red birthmark on her face at the time. Di Fui was the jade statue in the flashback. Gu Zijia's hands started to tremble. From a hints given to her by the firmament stone, she had already figured out that Di Fui was the one that she had been thinking about, Huang Tuesday. However, that was only a guess. Without any memory of him, the feeling was not very intense when she first made the realization. This time, the moment she recognized the man in her flashbacks, she was immediately excited and saddened at the same time. If she was not mistaken, the jade status must be Huang too, who was busy cultivating at the time. That was how they first met. The flashbacks lasted longer this time around, for about 4 to 5 minutes. She saw that she had completely stripped off every piece of clothing on the jade status and wore the robes on herself. She even caressed the face of the statue and touched the statue's private part out of curiosity. Before she left, she even kissed the statue. Every scene played back like a classic black and white movie, and as the images flashed before her eyes, her heart began to race. She was falling for him all over again. Without thinking, she leaned forward and planted a soft kiss on Di Fui's lips, like how she did to the jade statue. She did so with the exact same movements as before and the same position. After the kiss, she was surprised to find out that Di Fui's lips were burning hot. His peaceful expression had concealed the fact that he was suffering. Without the kiss, she would never have found out that his body temperature was actually scorching hot. What was his soul undergoing? Gu Shijio dared not waste another minute in her contemplation. She was still stuck at the removal of his undershirt and desperately ripped the shirt open and took it off. Finally, all of his clothes were removed. Di Fui's body was undeniably well built. He looked fit without his clothes on. Although he was muscular, he was not too bulky either. Every inch of his strong muscles was perfectly shaped. Even the most professional bodybuilder would not look half as good as he did. Although they had slept together before, it was the first time that she removed his clothes. Gu Shijio was embarrassed and excited at the same time. She tried very hard to ignore the strange feelings that crept up on her. Slowly, she entangled herself in his arms. Find authorized novels in Web Novel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Gu Shijio just had to curse the firmament stone for proposing such a ridiculous idea. However, she did as told and pulled him close. Their bodies were finally in contact with one another. She could feel his breaths very clearly against her skin. Although she knew she should not be feeling aroused, she could not help it. Determined to proceed with the rescue, she stopped her mind from going places and focused on the steps that she should be taking. She did everything that the firmament stone had instructed her to do. Every step was accurate and correct. When she was finally done, their bodies seemed to be attached like a pair of conjoined twins. Their legs were crossed together, and so were their arms. She held them tightly, just as instructed. If others were to see them in this position, they would definitely think that they were conducting the double physical and spiritual cultivation. Furthermore, from their sitting positions, she was the one who initiated it. Before Gu Shijio started the mission, she had already decided that once everything was over, she had to be the first one to wake up. She would then dress herself up in the fastest way that she could, so that he would not see what they were actually doing. It would be an embarrassment if he did. Gu Shijio had made many assumptions about the situation that Di Fui might be trapped in. For example, she thought that he might be caught in a sea of flames or a siege surrounded by terrible beasts. He could have been injured too, perhaps by a creature or person who was more powerful. She also assumed that he would be trapped with Yun Qing Luo. Maybe this was Yun Yanli's evil plan all the while, which led to an inevitable fight. Di Fui possessed great kung fu, but he might not be as powerful as Yun Yanli right now. Fortunately, he was definitely smarter. She believed that he was able to orchestrate careful strategies and keep himself safe. Anyone that was able to dominate a fight with him must be someone or something extraordinary and very unpredictable. All in all, she had made many assumptions about the worst kind of situation that he might be in. She was well prepared to get herself involved in a fight between life and death. Every possible scenario that she had conjured in her mind was the worst-case scenario. The path that guided her in was a visible mass of clouds. She had to go through many challenges to get near him at the end of the demanding course. To her utter surprise, she saw him sitting peacefully by a lake. It looked as if he was cultivating. Gusts of wind blew by her face, immersing her with a pleasant scent of fresh, blossoming flowers. The scenery was as spectacular, too beautiful to be absorbed all at once. From her point of view, the lake, the willows, the flowers, the greens, and the man had made up a beautiful painting in perfect tones and composition. She could not keep her eyes away. Gu Shijio gazed at him with her fists clenched. She thought that he had left his body behind to come here and meditate. This must be one of his common practices, as the two guardians had clearly told her that the Devil King would sometimes leave his physical body and wander around with his soul. There he was sitting and cultivating. His incredible improvement must have something to do with his unique ways of practice. He seemed at ease. As for her, she was embarrassed by all that she had been through to get here. She still could not get over the fact that they were naked. She started blaming the firmament stone for tricking her into saving him. It had made the situation sound way worse, keeping her in suspense. In the end, the situation was the direct opposite of what she thought it to be. Speaking of which, Yun Qing Luo was nowhere to be seen. If they had left their bodies behind together, they should be together with him, right? The firmament stone had clearly asked her before that no matter what they were doing, she would still step in and save him. Her answer might sound carefree, but she was actually a little worried. She was worried that they might be making love to one another when she came by, or that they were having some sweet little moments together. She was mentally prepared to witness that before her eyes. From the way the firmament stone asked her questions, she had already figured out that they would surely be together. However, she looked around and was overwhelmed by the slopes that were ablaze with flower blossoms and some dense trees. A white tint on the slope had caught her attention. Gu Shijio could immediately tell that it was Di Fuyus. If he even had the time to make and secure a tent, he should be doing just fine. Perhaps Yun Qing Luo could be in the tent right now. Was this a part of Di Fuyus' date? Had he left his body behind and took her soul with him to go on a date in the wild? If that were the case, was it inappropriate for Gu Shijio to be here? Gu Shijio wanted to turn around and just leave. However, her reasoning stopped her from acting impulsively. She had been through a lot to be here, so she definitely needed to find out more about him before leaving. There she stood, contemplating if she should approach his tent using her teleportation technique to see if Yin Qingluo was in the tent. If she was really in there, then there was no need for Gu Shiju to show up. She could find her way back, just like how she came in and pretended nothing ever happened. She could also avoid the awkwardness since she would wake up first. She was caught in a daze when Di Fui turned around and saw her there. Gu Shiju was still figuring out her next step, but it was all too late. Their eyes met. Her heart raced at that very moment. She had not had a clear view of his face, but she decided that she needed to stand her ground. "Mister, you look at ease here. It is such a carefree day." Gu Shiju was relieved to see him all well and safe, but was also irritated at the back of her mind. A little bit of sarcasm would be appropriate to cover her embarrassment. Di Fui did not seem to respond in kind, however. The look in his eyes was rather stern, almost lethal. The icy look in his eyes made her skin creep. Gu Shiju could almost feel his hatred. Troubled, she wondered if her presence was actually a disturbance. The look in his eyes was simply unforgiving. It was as if he wanted her dead. Obviously irritated, she gave him a tight smile and continued to bombard him with a series of ironic questions. "You must be here to practice. Perhaps you are here with a friend?" The body that you so impulsively left behind looked as good as dead. Your men were terribly worried, as there was no way they could wake you up. They thought you were caught in some serious trouble. They asked for my help right after I was done with the alchemy. I agreed to help, just as you have helped me many times before. Now that I know that you are safe, I should not be here to interrupt you anymore. You may proceed without me. Farewell." She was terribly embarrassed and was ready to leave right away. Also, she decided that she needed to give the firmament stone a lesson for tricking her about the situation. "Gu Shiju." She could hear Di Fui's hoarse voice calling out to her from afar. His voice sounded rough and harsh, like he was a bit unwell. However, he was still charming to her. Nevertheless, she could tell from his tone that he was somewhat dubious of her existence. Gu Shiju raised her eyebrow at him and nodded briefly. She did not use any facial disguise technique, so he should be able to recognize her just fine. Nonetheless, his expression clearly showed his disbelief. Was he surprised by her presence here in his space? Now that he had already seen her, Gu Shiju no longer felt the need to hide anything. She looked at him proudly and asked, "Why did you call me?" Slowly, Di Fui paced towards her. His grudge disappeared as soon as he could see her clearly. He was still gazing at her intensely. "Is it really you?" Gu Shiju was thoroughly confused. What kind of situation was this? Chapter 2409. Was something wrong with his memory? If she had a mirror with her, the first thing she would do was to take it out and have a look at herself to see what was really confusing him. Gu Shiju touched her face intuitively and realized that there was nothing wrong. She frowned at him and asked, "Are you all right?" Wait, you do not look very well." Gu Shiju finally noticed his pale complexion that would occasionally flush crimson. Also, his forehead was drenched in sweat. Before she knew what to do, she immediately teleported to his side and grabbed his wrist. "Let me check on you." Di Fui stood frozen and did not resist. He looked at her, and all he saw was her thick lashes. He then took a look at her puckered lips and her little finger that would naturally point upward every time she read his pulse. It was really her. She had made it here, surprisingly. It all happened so suddenly. Di Fui could not believe his eyes. At first, he thought that Yin Qingluo was finally smarter and managed to imitate all of Gu Zijia's little movements to look more convincing. After all, Yin Qingluo had single-handedly created this illusion. Anything was possible right now. As her soft fingers were placed gently on his wrist, he could feel his blood rushing in excitement. He wanted to hold her tightly in his arms. However, he needed to identify if she was really Gu Shiju before making any approach. "Gu Shiju, when I was trapped in my father's wizardry barrier many years ago, you visited me and released a ferocious leopard to attack me. We even fought, and my clothes were burned. In the end, I only had my underwear," he slowly described, while gazing at her intensely. Gu Shijio was reading his pulse when he started reminiscing the past. She did not feel that it was the right time to do so, however. Was something wrong with his memory? Gu Shijio did not look up at him. He did not get the facts right. The creature that I released was actually a black python. I remember it clearly because the python was the one that I personally captured. Also, when you lost all of your clothes, you were still wearing a band that managed to cover your tummy. It was not your underwear, she explained. After Gu Shijio managed to assess his condition, she finally looked up and met his big, shiny eyes. Her heart raced a little. It was all involuntary. All she had done was correct a couple of facts, so she did not understand why he had to stare at her so intensely as if he had just hit the jackpot. From his pulse, she could tell that he was poisoned. Could the toxins have affected his emotions? He seemed to struggle to express himself. This poison was also new to Gu Shijio, so she needed to find out more about it in order to help him. She asked, "Which parts of your body are in pain?" All of a sudden, he gripped her wrist tightly and pulled her into his arms. He pulled her so hard that she almost hit her nose on his chest. What are you trying to do?" Gu Shijio did not see it coming. Desperately, she tried to break free from his embrace. However, he did not intend to let her go. He tightened his arms around her, as if he had just found his savior. "Shijio, help me," he whispered in her ear. She could clearly feel his warm breaths. He could finally be sure about her identity. He had never told anyone about that particular incident, not even his parents, as it was not something he wanted to share. Only the two of them knew about it. Hence, he had no intention of holding back his desires any longer. He had all the reasons he needed to be with her. "Shijio, I am not feeling well." His voice was trembling and full of pity. Gu Shijio was instantly overwhelmed by her maternal instinct. I am here for you. Be patient, and let me examine your condition. Once I know what is wrong, I can give you the correct medication," she stammered in response. His familiar breath on her skin and tight embrace made her heart pound in her chest. "There is no need for examination," he added. His lips were almost touching her ear. "I know the poison that has infected me. It is a love potion. It can only be cured if you and I perform the double physical and spiritual cultivation together." Difui tried to suppress his rising desire as he explained the situation to her as calmly as he could. He had been suppressing his desires for so long and started to feel a sense of hopelessness. It was completely out of his expectations that she would show up in this place. His long-felt desire could finally be satisfied. The moment he could finally be sure that it was really her, he could no longer control his desires. The only thing he desperately needed was her body. Unfortunately, there were still many misunderstandings between them that remained unsolved. Since he knew her well, he was certain that she would push him away if he skipped the explanations. Gu Shijio was still shocked by Difui's revelation on the type of poison that had infected him. His words echoed in her ears and remained unprocessed. She was still trying to think it through. Did he say the love potion? Damn it, it cannot be. Does he not have any way to resist it? How could he be so easily affected? She had not forgotten about their first night together. It happened all because of his consumption of an animal's penis, causing him to have a strong sexual urge. At that time, she had volunteered herself since she thought that they were engaged. But was she going to do it again? She only agreed before because she felt that it was part of her responsibility as his fiancée. She wanted to cling on to him as she was worried that he might leave her. This time, since he already found his other half, Yin Qing Luo, she no longer felt the need to offer herself to him. With a strong push, she finally broke free from his embrace. Difui's body was strongly affected by the love potion, so he barely had enough spiritual power and strength left to stop her. He took many steps backward while trying to steady himself from falling into the lake. He looked at her in disbelief. Do you still not want me?" Gu Shijio took a deep breath to try and calm down. "Prince Nianma, if the double physical and spiritual cultivation is the only way to cure the toxins in your body, I am afraid that I am not the right candidate for the task. Keep it down for a moment, and I will look for Yun Qing Luo. Her soul has also left the body, so she should be here with you. Where is she now? Let me get her here." She turned around and was ready to look for the woman who she thought should handle the job. If their souls had left their bodies at the same time, Yun Qingluo should not be too far away. It would not be a difficult search, she thought. Di Fui immediately grabbed her hand as soon as she turned away. This time, he held on her hand so tightly that she could feel pain in her joints. Gu Shijio, are you really desperate to send me away? Won't you get jealous, picturing us doing the double physical and spiritual cultivation together? Gu Shijio was taken by surprise. Would she become jealous? She was certainly uncomfortable at the slightest thought of it. However, even though she found it hard to accept, it was the reality that she had to deal with right now. She is the one that you like, isn't she? I do not want to hinder you. She finally shared her thoughts after a long sigh. Is that why you chose to let go? Is it really so easy to let me go? Gu Shijio, we have been in love since our previous lives. How can you give up on me so easily? Di Fui made his point clear. He looked hurt by her response. Am I not worthy of your effort? Do you really have to give up on us because of some minor problem? Gu Shijio, I find your love hard to believe. If you loved me enough, you would not have let me go. Gu Shijio did not know what to say, but tears started rolling in her eyes. I did not give up on you. If you had not fallen for someone else, I would never have let you go. Chapter 24:11. I only want you to be happy. When you went missing, I never stopped looking for you for the entire year. Did you know that I had been almost every corner of the Shuro world? I entered each path with hope that simply turned into disappointment every time I left the city. Did you know how difficult it was for me to come here and look for you in the Devil Kingdom? We finally met after so long, and the first thing that you said to me was, "What are you doing here?" You even said that it was over between us. You treated Yun Qingluo with care and pampered her in every way possible. I could see that very clearly. Obviously, I thought you did not want me anymore. Those sorrowful moments reemerged, so she had to hold back the tears in her eyes. It was you who changed your mind first. How could you blame it on me? Di Fui, you cannot be so unreasonable. She then raised her hand to wipe away the tears that streamed down her cheeks. I let you go because I want to make things easier for you. I only want you to be happy. It was evident that she cared very much about him. She only wanted him to live a happy and blissful life, which was why she had to let him go. She even tried to save Yun Qingluo despite losing out on the love of her life to that woman. Surely that showed how unconditional her love was toward Di Fui. How could he be so unreasonable? If Gu Shijio were an ordinary woman, she would probably just hit him in the chest at that point. However, being the extraordinary person that she was, she wanted to kick Di Fui really hard right to show her resentment toward his actions. She wanted to make sure that he knew what she had been through for him. However, because he was still suffering from the love potion, so she decided to save the kicks for later. Shijio, your love is my biggest fulfillment. Di Fui disregarded her resistance and pulled her into his arms once again. You are the only one that I have ever loved, no one else. Yun Qingluo saved my life, so I treated her like a sister in return. We have never shared any form of intimacy. Gu Shijio was stunned by his comments. Could she believe what he said? She had seen and heard many things that were the opposite of what he claimed to have said. Furthermore, he led her to believe that those rumors were true. Shijio, you cannot judge the situation solely based on what you see. Sometimes, what you see may not necessarily be the truth. Perhaps it is all but a show that is intended to deceive its viewers. You need to feel it with your heart and analyze the situation accordingly. Di Fui got to the bottom of it. He knew exactly what she was thinking of at that moment. Gu Shijio remained silent. By that response, Di Fui knew that she was finally listening and was a little relieved. The poison that she made was one of a kind. We needed the blood from her heart to entice the silver ring crocodile, and we needed her alive. She was brought here to make amends for her wrongdoings by helping you create the cure, he added. Gu Shijio was shocked. She gazed at him in astonishment. Was Yun Qingluo only here because they needed the blood from her heart? Was that the reason why Di Fui brought Yun Qingluo here? Flashbacks started to hit her as she recalled the situation when Di Fui finally drove the crocodile into taking the bait. Yun Qingluo was all tied up by Di Fui as soon as she arrived. Her clothes were untidy, and her complexion was as pale as a sheet. The situation back then was pretty dangerous. She had to focus on her fight with the crocodile, so she did not pay much attention to Yun Qingluo and thought that the crocodile injured her. Now that she started thinking about it, the little details seemed to prove that Di Fui was actually telling the truth. She never knew that the blood from Yun Qingluo's heart was needed to bait the crocodile. For ordinary people, they would probably lose their lives if blood was drawn in such a manner. Yun Qingluo was an exception, as her practice in kung fu and cultivation managed to save her life. Despite her abilities, the procedure still had to be conducted with special tools as a precautionary measure. Gu Shijio finally understood why Di Fui had been so protective of Yun Qingluo. He needed to take the blood from her heart to get the cure for Gu Shijio, so he needed to make sure that she was alive by keeping her out of danger. She finally understood his intention. She was smart enough to figure out the rest of the story from there, though she did not know how to feel about the situation. After a while, she suddenly asked, "Why did both of your souls leave the swamp together?" "I fell into her trap." Di Fui continued to enlighten her with a few details. He kept the story simple, but Gu Shijio was still quite surprised and equally disturbed upon hearing about all that he had been through. She had never expected that Yun Qingluo would be so obsessed with Di Fui. In order to be with Di Fui, there was no limit to the price that she was willing to pay. She would manipulate her soul, even her pride, just to get what she wanted. Gu Shijio shook her head to dismiss the thought. She could not understand Yun Qingluo at all. Meanwhile, she also proceeded to check Di Fui's pulse to find out more about the poison. It was really one of a kind. She could not think of any cure other than the double physical and spiritual cultivation. Once she was sure of his condition, she was surprised by the sudden emergence of a red wooden bed next to her. It looked quite solid and spacious enough for two of them to spend the night together. Then, he continued to show her to the side of the bed and sat her down. Their bodies were leaning against one another at the time. He held her tightly at the waist, and Gu Shijio could immediately feel the warmth of his hand. His body temperature was abnormally high. She looked up, and their eyes locked in an intense gaze. Upon observing him more carefully, she realized that he started sweating more profusely than before. "What else do you want to know? Ask me everything. I will tell you everything that I know," he added smilingly. He smiled at her sweetly, but Gu Shijio was quite terrified by the immense desire in his eyes. It was as if she were a little prey that he would soon indulge in. She involuntarily shivered a little while trying to avoid his eyes. Nothing else," she murmured. "Great." Relieved, Di Fui gave her another charming smile. He then put her down on the bed. "So, will you be helping me with the cure?" Di Fui asked the question courteously, but what he did was the complete opposite. He lay on top of her, seemingly taking the lead. His eyes were still filled with a burning desire, as if telling her that she had no way to escape from him this time. Gu Zijia's heart throbbed with excitement, and her face flushed crimson. She could clearly feel his erection since he was lying on top of her. I actually think there is another way to help you cure the toxins. I think that there should be another way." She spoke rather unconfidently. "Baby, this is the only way. It is the easiest and the most effective way, surely." Gu Shijio did not know how to answer him anymore. About that, she hesitantly added. The thought of their first night together came to her mind. Now that he was poisoned, he would definitely be wilder than before. Would she feel pain or pleasure? She gulped nervously, but there was nothing she could do to change the situation. He was already kissing her intensely. "Shijio, I cannot hold it back anymore." The next second, her clothes were completely torn apart, and he started to shower her with kisses everywhere. "Shijio, I'm really glad that you came." Gu Shijio finally stopped struggling and started embracing him tightly. Meanwhile, she could not help but think about the firmament stone. She finally understood what it meant when it said that she was the only one who could save him. Indeed, she had come a long way to surrender herself to him. Chapter 24:13. A glimpse of his true feelings, Gu Shijio could clearly smell his scent and feel the strength of his well-built body. She breathed hastily under his hot breath. Di Fui held her tightly in his arms, so close that their bodies were basically merged into one. Perhaps it was the last time that the two of them would be separated. They were like two soul mates who had to go through many obstacles to be reunited with each other again. Now that they had finally found one another, they would not let anything get in their way. They were clinging on to one another physically, showering each other with kisses and endless affection. No amount of intimacy was enough for them to express their deeply rooted love for one another. Both of them were naked, and Di Fui traced every part of her body and kissed every inch from her lips to her little finger. She was overwhelmed by how affectionate Di Fui was to her. The man no longer wanted to hold back his desire for her. However, he also knew that this was only her second time having sex. It had been a while since their first night together, so even if he was desperate, he did not want to risk hurting her, for fear that she might dislike the experience and push him away in the future. Therefore, he tried to control himself and went at a slower pace than what he wanted. He tried to satisfy her needs in every way possible so that she would surrender herself willingly to him. Indeed, his efforts paid off, as it was a very pleasurable experience for her. Everywhere his fingers glided over gave her such an irresistible sensation. Gu Shijio was surprised at how slowly he took things in bed. She knew how hard it was for him to control his desire, as she had expected him to go all out, but to her surprise, he did not skip the foreplay that preceded intercourse. He really did care about her. His loving gesture touched her. She wrapped her arms around his waist as she planted a gentle kiss on his lips. "You? Hurry up. I am ready." Astonished, Di Fui whispered into her ear, "Do you want me now?" Gu Shijio could already feel the eagerness that took over all of her senses. She gave him another kiss on his chin and answered frankly, "Yes." Di Fui's eyes darkened, for he was ready to unleash his desires for her. "Baby, your honesty is what I admire the most." He then began his quest. Both of them had experienced the sensation before. There was a mixture of anxiety and anticipation for Gu Shijio. It was the opposite for Di Fui. He was like a man who just got his thirst quenched. The moment was truly intimate for the two of them. Occasionally, the flowers would shed and dance in the swirling winds that circled them. That produced a fantastic scent. Some petals fell onto their bodies that were now drenched in sweat, gathering and forming into numerous red dots on their bare backs. A petal slowly landed in Gu Zijia's hand, which finally reminded her of something she had long forgotten. Some of her senses returned, and she pushed him away slightly all of a sudden. "Yin Qing Luo creates this place, right? Where did you send her? Will she come back and see us here?" She did not want others to see what they were doing. "Don't worry. I have her locked up in the Wushao wizardry barrier that only permits entrances, not exits. She cannot possibly escape from there. Be patient and just focus on me." He became more aggressive and completely distracted her away from her preoccupation. There was one more thing that still bothered her. If Yin Qing Luo created the wizardry barrier, would she be able to tell about everything that was going on inside it? Yin Qing Luo could tell that Gu Shijio was present, but she could not see what that they were doing. Yin Qing Luo had been planning this plot for years. Yet, it seemed to bridge the gap between Di Fui and someone else unexpectedly. All she had created was someone else's success. Yin Qing Luo was utterly frustrated with the unpleasant surprise of Gu Zijia's presence, but there was nothing she could do as she was trapped in the fires of hell. She only hoped that Di Fui would not be able to recognize Gu Shijio, and that he would think that the Gu Shijio that he was seeing was one of her many illusions. She wanted Gu Shijio to suffer just as much as she did. Every moment passed was a torment to Yin Qing Luo. Her soul was getting burned up in flames. She had suffered a great deal. Evil thoughts surfaced her mind as she kept waiting for Gu Shijio to be mistakenly sent to join her in agony. 4 hours had passed, but there was still no sight of Gu Shijio. Yin Qing Luo felt as though she had been waiting for an eternity. Soon, She could tell that the wizardry barrier had started to shake a little and was slowly breaking apart. That signaled that Di Fui's poison was getting cured. Gu Shijio must be the one who came to his aid. Yun Qingluo could not hold back her tears anymore. With a cry of anguish, she was on the verge of breaking down. She wanted to end her life, but to bring the two of them down as well. However, one of her souls was still trapped in her physical body. She could not perish unless her body was dead. Di Fui, kill me now. Kill me. She screamed and shouted with all of her strength. Unfortunately, the confinement that Di Fui had created for her was completely restricted. No one could even hear her, no matter how loudly she cried out. They were happy together. The joy was so surreal to them. Yin Qingluo thought that she had everything planned out. The love potion that she made for Di Fui was meant to be incurable by any medicines. The only way was to perform the double physical and spiritual cultivation with a woman. She wanted Di Fui to have an unforgettable experience, so she made sure that the amount of joy and pleasure that accompanied the cultivation was double the usual. Also, the woman would be able to share an equal amount of pleasure from the man as well. She thought that the woman would be her. Since it would only be their souls that were entangled spiritually, their physical bodies would not experience any exhaustion at all. Di Fui and Gu Shijio were indeed having a great time together. It had been 3 times already. During the first round, Gu Shijio could feel that her legs were a little sore. After the second time, she could already feel that her waist was becoming a little stiff. She thought that 2 rounds were enough to quench the desire in his body, so she wanted to get up from the bed right after he cleaned her up with the cleaning spell. However, he would not let her leave. Although it had been a very pleasant experience, Gu Shijio was still a little worried about him. She pushed his chest away and said, "I think this is enough. You should not be asking for more. Do not stress out your body too much." Di Fui locked his arms around the top of her head. "Do not worry about me. I know my body well." Gu Shijio did not know what to say. "Baby, I have been waiting for this for so long. You have to let me enjoy it to the fullest." Astonished, Gu Shijio was surprised by his unfulfilled needs. "Fui, you are still young, so we should be more careful in this matter. You are not even 10 years old yet." After telling him her concern, she immediately had to pay the price for what she said. Di Fui looked at her with a crooked smile. "Baby, I did not know that I am still a child to you. Very well then, you should also know that children are quite naughty." At first, he was worried that he might hurt her, so he dared not push it to the limits. This time around, he purposely increased the speed of his actions. Every thrust was so intense and satisfying at the same time. Utterly contented, she could no longer talk and only focused on his every moment. Di Fui was the son of a god and was endowed with a unique physique and soul. A year of development to him was the equivalent of a decade of growth to an ordinary man. In other words, he could achieve more progress in a year than others could in 10. Now that he was 9 years old, it was the equivalent of him being a 90-year-old man. Therefore, he was already an adult mentally and physically. Generally, no one would bring up his age when they met him, as he already seemed like a mature adult. Gu Shijio was the only woman who always paid attention to that particular detail. "Hey, have the toxins been cured or not?" After the 3rd time, Gu Shijio finally surrendered. Could he possibly be asking for more? She wanted to read his pulse, but was immediately halted. Di Fui grabbed her hands and turned her around to change to another position. "Almost there, just a little bit more," he whispered into her ear. Helplessly, Gu Shijio could only obey. He was indeed a very, very desperate man at the moment. Since she volunteered herself, he made use of every bit of her body, from head to toe. There was hardly any distance between them. She looked at his beautiful face intently and was immediately overwhelmed by the intense feelings of love that they shared. There were some things that she did not quite understand, but there was one thing she was sure about. He truly loved her. It was an undeniable fact. She knew very well that she loved him too. She was the happiest that she could be when they were together, even if they did not do anything. When he went missing, she felt as if there was a missing piece in her life. It was as if she was rootless and adrift, like a floating leaf with no sense of direction. She could not help but think about their previous lives and how madly in love they had been. Then, she suddenly recalled something. Di Fui said that they had been in love since his past life. Had he recalled his memory? Do you now remember your past? Were we married? I have a feeling that we used to live together for quite some time, Gu Shizhou commented. Di Fui was slightly distracted by her question. He then planted a soft kiss on her lips to stop her from talking. Stay focused. Gu Shizhou complied and remained quiet. She was really eager to know if he had really recalled their past together. However, she needed to wait until everything was over. She was curious about what he used to do in the past and how they met. There were many other things that she wanted to find out too. The firmament stone had all the answers to her questions, but refused to share anything with Gu Shizhou. Finally, there was a way for her to learn the truth. Baby, if you get distracted again, I will do this to you all night and make sure that you will not be able to get off from the bed. I can go up to 7 times if that is what it takes. Di Fui bit her ears as he threatened her. Based on his abilities in bed, she believed him and dared not think about anything else at that moment. If he really insisted on doing it for 7 rounds, she would be completely exhausted by the time they were done. Time continued to pass, and Gu Shizhou had no idea how long they had been in bed. She only knew that she was fast asleep before he even got off from her. When Di Fui tried to clean her up, she thought that he was trying to make love to her again, and she quickly rejected it. No more, she begged in her sleep while holding his hand. Di Fui teased her, Baby, my toxins are not entirely cured. Settle it yourself. She could still think straight, even when she was asleep. Try and look for Miss Five Fingers. Although Di Fui knew a little bit about the modern era, there were still some terms that he had never heard of before. Miss Five Fingers? Who is that? He was absolutely confused. She was surprised that he did not know what she was talking about. With a disdainful smile, she showed off her hand and explained to him, This is Miss Five Fingers. Di Fui was speechless. He reached across and took her hand. Are you offering to help me with your hands? Gu Shizhou pulled her hand away and answered scornfully, Use your own hands. He was surprised by how much she actually knew about sex. Gu Shizhou had fallen asleep in his presence. She was akin to a traveler who wandered around the world and finally found a home and someone she could trust. Her face looked calm and comfortable despite being in the presence of another man. One of her little hands still held his finger, worried that he would run away or disappear again. Gu Shizhou pulled his hand toward her and used it as a pillow for her small face. Di Fui was certainly delighted by her actions. He cuddled her tightly in his embrace. The poison had been completely removed from his body, and the wizardry barrier that Yun Qingluo made could no longer trap him in this place. He could return to the Shuro world with Gu Shizhou at any time. As he contemplated his recent predicament, he was actually very puzzled. The wizardry barrier that Yun Qingluo made was so abnormal. How did she even create this kind of poison? Meanwhile, in Gu Zijia's sleep, she mumbled about something. She said, Deliver to the door. All of a sudden, and Di Fui had no clue who she was talking to in her sleep. Baby, do you want to go back? He asked in her ear. I am sleepy. Don't give me any trouble. Let me sleep. Thus, Di Fui decidedly to stay quietly in that place. As long as Gu Shizhou was there with him, it did not matter where he was located. In truth, he had not recalled the memories of his so-called past life, but only confirmed from Yun Qingluo that in his previous life, he was the Lord, Huang Tuesday. He did not expect Huang Tu to be reincarnated, given that he was said to have broken the heavenly laws in the past. There were very few people who could break the heavenly laws. Perhaps, in his past life, he must have been a mighty person. Did his father know the inside story? Did he have the same surname in his previous life? Who else had this memory besides Yun Qingluo? He shook his head to dismiss the countless questions that surfaced in his mind and heart. For the time being, there was no answer. Also, he was too tired to ponder about it now. Di Fui started to shift his thoughts away from his past and back to his present. Yun Qingluo was no longer an issue for him, but Yun Yanli remained a cause for concern. Furthermore, he had found out from Yun Qingluo that there was an even bigger man who hid behind him. Although the person had not officially appeared, he had certainly stirred a lot of trouble for Di Fui. The man used some dark sorcery to accelerate Yun Yanli's growth so that he would reach the level of a golden immortal in a short period of 100 years. But what was his intention? Surely he had a bigger plan than to take Di Fui down. Was it Luo Jiuchen who was behind everything? Was he trying to steal the title of Divine Lord from his father? Seeing the type of curses that Yun Luo had involved herself in gave Di Fui an indication that this was the work of Luo Jiuchen. However, Luo Jiuchen had been locked away and was not allowed to come back for at least 50,000 years. Hence, it was unlikely to be Luo Jiuchen. Whoever it was, the person must be the one who taught Yun Yanli his powers about 200 years ago. Di Fui believed that Yun Yanli intended to become the Emperor Immortal. He was personally not very concerned about who held this position as long as they did not do something terrible and misuse their power. Therefore, if Yun Yanli got this position based on his own ability, he would not intervene. However, that was obviously not the case since the man had involved himself in dark sorcery to accelerate his development. Therefore, Di Fui needed to deal with this matter. He studied his hand and noted that he was currently a level 9 golden immortal. With his speed of cultivation, it would take at least 3 years for him to achieve the level of a mighty immortal. The difference between their abilities was too significant. He looked at the person in his arms and heaved a sigh of relief. Since she was by his side, he would push himself to work harder. Of course, he would also push her to become an immortal as soon as possible so that she could return to the upper bound with him. Besides, she had been practiced to the level of a great deity up there. Her skills should be comparable to his mother's. Gu Shijiu had told Di Fui before that her accomplishments were achieved in the lower bound. When she was still less than 50 years old, she had already cultivated to the level of a great deity. This was very extraordinary. The fact that she did so in the lower bound was even more remarkable. There were only 2 possibilities for this to happen. First, all the skills were passed to her before the death of Huang Tu's day. However, as Huang Tu disappeared, she lost her memory about it. Second, she was, indeed, a very extraordinary person. Among these 2, the first one seemed to make more sense to Di Fui, but he could not completely rule out the second conjecture either. After being punished by the heavenly laws and cursed to be in the Shura world, Gu Zijia's abilities had deteriorated substantially. However, perhaps her abilities would be restored once she makes it out? Di Fui bowed his head and kissed her forehead at the thought. He held her tightly in his arms and said, "Shijiu, although I am the reincarnation of Huang Tu, I still hope that you can fall in love with me in this life." This was one of the reasons why he never told Gu Shijiu that he was the reincarnation of Huang Tu, even after he confirmed that with Yun Luo. He really wanted Gu Shijiu to love him for the man he was right now as opposed to the person in her memory, which he did not know. Di Fui calculated the time and realized that it was still early. Since Gu Shijiu was tired, he should let her continue to rest. Therefore, he would let her sleep for another 4 hours. Right after that, they would need to return to their bodies and settle matters in the Shura world. Hua Qinyu had killed Yun Luo. He and Guardian Jin had been waiting outside the wizardry barrier set in place by Gu Shijiu. They were tasked to guard Yun Luo while waiting for Gu Shijiu to return together with Di Fui. As time passed by, the 2 of them grew rather uneasy. They were anxious, and Zhu Duqing was also worried. In fact, Zhu Duqing was more worried than them. He wanted to break into the barrier several times, but he could not enter it. Furthermore, Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua had been preventing him from doing so. The 2 guards were afraid that he would give them trouble, so Guardian Jin was assigned to follow Zhu Duqing at all times while Hua Qinyu was to guard Yun Luo. Yun Luo had been snoring away, so Hua Qinyu was not too concerned. However, Yun Luo seemed to have opened her eyes after some time, and Hua Qinyu was shocked by her action. He wanted to ask her if she was the culprit behind the Devil King's current predicament, but he was too stunned to think clearly at the time. "Kill me, kill me. Hua Qinyu, please kill me. I have suffered enough. You do love me, right? Can you even stand seeing me this way? Don't you want revenge for your brother and your niece? Kill me, so that you can avenge them and fulfill my request simultaneously." Although Yin Qingluo did not open her mouth to speak, Hua Qinyu could hear her, as if she did. It was a very tempting request. Hua Qinyu ignored her at the beginning. However, he could not seem to resist her constant persuasions that came in the form of threats, tears, and pleas. She had used all the methods she could. Hua Qianyu's heart was shaken, and finally, he was controlled by the voice. He pulled out his sword and stabbed it into Yin Qingluo's heart. He even took the opportunity to shatter her heart into pieces. Yin Qingluo screamed momentarily, and her body fell gently to the ground. Chapter 24:18. Could not be saved. The sudden loud cry had alarmed Guardian Jean. He ran toward the sound to take a look and was shocked by what his eyes had seen. "Wow, what did you do?" Hua Qinyu seemed to come to his senses and was also stunned by what he saw. He obviously did not want to kill her, but he seemed to be momentarily possessed. He looked at Yin Qingluo to see if she was still alive. However, there were no vital signs left. She cannot be saved. Zhu Duqing came over as well to check on the two of them. "Just leave her be." Hua Qinyu was disappointed with himself. The Devil King had instructed us to keep her alive. Zhu Duqing did not care. "The reason why your Devil King wanted to keep her alive was because of their past relationship. Since she is now dead, what can you do? By the way, why would you kill her? You even shattered her heart." Hua Qinyu lamented this. She had tricked me into killing her with a magical voice. Zhu Duqing remained silent. He frowned as he walked around Yin Qingluo's body. Although nothing seemed wrong on the surface, he had a hunch that things were not what they appear to be. Guardian Jean suddenly heard something. "Hey, are the animals outside a little instigated?" Zhu Duqing tried to listen, and his facial expression suddenly changed slightly. Something is wrong. As they were now deep underground, they should not be able to hear the creatures in the swamp. However, they could hear beasts approaching them from all directions right now. It was getting louder and louder, and the ground tremored more fiercely as it did. The gravel above their heads started crumbling down too. "Gosh, this cave is going to collapse." Hua Qinyu expressed his concern. It felt like a level 8 earthquake, and the three of them certainly found it difficult to keep their ground. If an earthquake happened deep in a cave, it was merely a catastrophe for those present. They must escape immediately, or they would be buried deep underground. Devil King and Miss Gu are still inside the wizardry barrier. Guardian Jean yelled and rushed to the side of the barrier. Hua Qinyu also followed him. As the two of them were in a hurry, no one brought Yin Qingluo's body with them. As they turned back, they could see that the place where she lied suddenly split into a big hole, and her body was subsequently swallowed into the hole. Because of the earthquake, all the rocks were shifted, which inevitably broke the rock array made by Gu Shijio. There were big and small stones crashing into each other, which created a big area of dust. Zhu Duqing ran towards the barrier and was ready to rescue Gu Shijio at the first opportunity that he had. All three of them were now right in front of the place where the barrier stood, and in the dust, they faintly saw two figures hugging each other. As the dust was still settling, they could not see the two figures clearly. Zhu Duqing shouted, "Master Shijio." He was about to leap over, but realized that the two people who were hugging each other suddenly moved. He had not seen the appearance of the two people, but noticed that there was a 7-colored ray of light that appeared in front of him. A milky white layer appeared instantly, covering the two people as the other three held their breaths. What did this mean? Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua were suddenly ecstatic. "Devil King." This milky white layer did not last a long time. It took a minute or two to remove the cover, but it eventually revealed the two people inside. Chapter 24:19. Could not be saved. 2. Gu Shijio and Di Fui emerged from the protective layer. The two of them were still in the same attire as before. One was wearing green clothes, and another one was wearing a purple robe. Gu Shijio looked a little confused. She distinctly remembered that she had sex with Di Fui. Then she was too tired and fell asleep. When she woke up, she realized that she was in a chaotic scene with boulders rolling around. Before Gushijio could react, there's a white cover around her. Then, there's a set of clothes automatically fitted on her body. She leaned against Di Fui and realized that he was also neatly dressed. "Baby, let's go out. Something has changed." Therefore, when the cover was withdrawn, everyone could finally see them. Gushijio seemed to realize what was going on, and her pretty face turned blue. The earthquake had entirely destroyed her stone array. She distinctly remembered that she was naked before she went into Di Fui's illusion. Did everyone here see her hugging Di Fui without her clothes on? Di Fui's arm was around her waist, and he said 2 words, "Don't worry." He woke up very timely and was shocked to see her naked in that position. However, because things were happening too quickly, he had no time to ponder about it. He saw the surrounding stone formation was crumbling and that there were shadows were flying toward him. Therefore, he quickly set up a wizardry barrier. Fortunately, the people around them did not see how they were tangled with each other. Otherwise, they might need to get their eyes removed. Gushijio breathed a sigh of relief, but she quickly became nervous when she observed her surroundings more carefully. The entire place was in ruins. Zhu Duqing was disappointed as he saw how intimate Gushijio and Di Fui were with one another. However, it was not the right time to care about these trivial matters. They should leave this place as soon as possible. He was well aware of that. Di Fui looked around and asked, "Where is Yun Qingluo?" Guardian Hua looked guilty. "She is dead. I killed her." Di Fui looked at him and almost understood the whole incident. He suddenly thought of something. The big earthquake here is related to Yun Qingluo's death. While Di Fui was resting with Gushijio in the illusion, he heard an abnormal sound. The barrier around him then disappeared like an avalanche while he heard the crazy laughter coming from Yun Qingluo. "Di Fui, I will pull you down with me to my grave." At that time, he wondered how he could possibly hear Yun Qingluo as he had trapped her. Now he finally understood. This poisonous swamp was the base for her evil activities. Perhaps her soul had somehow merged with this swamp, and once she died, this swamp would be destroyed as well. As they had entered into the deepest part of the swamp, which was at least a few hundred miles away from the shore, they would not possibly be able to run out of this place. Di Fui pulled Zhu Duqing toward him and said, "Open your magical door." Zhu Duqing was not willing to do so. "No, it takes half of my spiritual power to open it. I opened it a few days ago, and I have not recovered yet. We should run away now. We're not far from the big hole that you used to lure the crocodile in earlier. It is useless for us to go there. I am afraid that the situation there would be worse than where we are right now. You must open the door." Di Fui's stance was firm. Zhu Duqing was anxious. "If I use it again, I'll be pretty much redundant. I would probably not even be able to run." Di Fui smashed a boulder nearby into pieces. "It doesn't matter. If you can't run, I will order someone to carry you." Guardian Jean. Guardian Jean immediately stood beside Zhu Duqing. "Mr. Zhu, rest assured, I will definitely carry you, and I will not leave you behind." Zhu Duqing was speechless. He had no choice but to agree with it. He raised his hand to cast a spell, and finally, the magical door was opened. "Quick, quick, I can't hold it for long." Di Fui grabbed Gushijio and quickly jumped in. The 2 guards then followed them in. Zhu Duqing seemed to think of something all of a sudden. He smacked his head. "Gosh, I should have asked them to enter at the same time. We are going to be in trouble." Seeing that the entire hole was going to collapse, Zhu Duqing did not dare to delay his escape any longer and also jumped in. There were large meteorites in the sky that were on fire and headed for the ground. As they hit the land on such high impact, the entire place shook and cracked all over. There was also magma in between the cracks that swallowed everything that passed by. The beasts in the poisonous swamp were running aimlessly as they did not know where to go. Some of them fell into the magma, while others perished from the fireballs that crashed onto them. The scene certainly resembled an apocalypse. The fierce beasts that attacked them before could not do anything in the face of the natural disaster. When Gu Shijio and Di Fui jumped through the door, they found themselves still in the poisonous swamp again. It was just as good as walking out of the cave. This guy is completely unreliable. Gu Shijio was disappointed. She looked around and asked Di Fui, "Why haven't the others reached yet?" There were only two of them there. Di Fui pulled her along with him as he avoided the falling destructive fireballs. The magical door that Zhu Duqing controls is very strange. Not everyone that jumps through the door will go to the same place. When he offended me in the past, I chased after him to the point where he had to open one of his doors. I followed him into one as he fled, but ended up in a different place. I think it is the same this time. I thought he was able to control it before and intentionally sent me somewhere else. It seems I was mistaken. Gu Shijio was speechless for a moment. She could not believe that her apprentice had done something so stupid. Does that mean that all of us are in different places? Such an unreliable bamboo man. He is certainly not someone you can count on. You picked up this apprentice rather hastily. When we meet him again, you should drop him from your apprenticeship. And when you're ready for a new disciple, I will help you to examine the person and make sure that he or she will satisfy you. Di Fui took the opportunity to make demands and let off steam about Zhu Duqing. He had not been impressed by the man. Since he got close to Gu Shijio, he had always wanted to leave him behind somewhere. Gu Shijio did not respond to Di Fui's complaints. Instead, she chose to focus her attention on their surroundings. The poisonous air around them was still very potent. Fortunately, the clothes that Di Fui had given Gu Shijio were very good at blocking out any unwanted particles from the air. Moreover, Di Fui had set up a protective barrier around them so that the poisonous atmosphere would not harm them. Due to the calamity of the situation, they did not know their exact location and did not know which direction to go. Flying was probably their best option. As expected, they encountered all kinds of beasts, but since everyone was simply trying to escape, they did not have time to attack and hurt each other. It was such a rare sight. In the midst of finding their way out, Di Fui and Gu Shijio took out their directed audio spells and tried to contact the two guards as well as Zhu Duqing, but they could not be contacted. Perhaps the poisonous swamp had indirectly blocked their signal. Since the rest of them could not be contacted, Gu Shijio and Di Fui could only concern themselves with breaking out of this place first. Hopefully, the three of them were already outside. Gu Shijio followed Di Fui into the air as he used his spiritual power to help them fly. No matter what he encountered along the way, he held Gu Zijia's hand tightly with no intention of letting go. This feeling gave Gu Shijio some peace of mind. She somehow remembered her last moment in the upper bound, where disaster had struck her and all the immortals that were with her had fled away. She was alone at the time and finally fell into a whirlpool. She then found herself in the Shuro world with no memories of herself. This landslide somehow reminded her of that calamity. The main difference was that she had Di Fui by her side this time. They would face the challenge together. This feeling was so good. She looked at the flaming rocks that fell from the sky like rain. Was this the meteorite rain that she had heard of? It looked so beautiful, but it was also deadly. There seemed to be a woman's laughter in the air again. She sounded like a person who had lost her mind. Gu Shijio frowned as the loud screams made her eardrums uncomfortable. Is Yun Qing Luo still alive? Has she turned into a devil? No, she is dead. She can't be alive. However, she had probably attached her soul to this swamp. Therefore, when she died, the swamp also turned into a state of chaos. This voice is probably her leftover resentment on this land. Don't be afraid. Don't worry, Di Fui. Even if she is alive, I'm not afraid of her. Gu Shijio laughed. If it were not because of you, I would not have paid any attention to her. Di Fui held her little hand as he responded, Baby, I know that you are a strong girl. There is nothing that can knock you down. At such a critical moment, this guy still had the mood to sweet talk. Gu Shijio pulled him together with her and teleported away. Let's continue this conversation once we escape. For now, please obediently follow me. Gu Zijia's teleportation technique was truly remarkable. Each time she used it, she could travel about 30 miles. Furthermore, her sense of direction was top-notch. Therefore, although she was not sure where she is at the moment, she could tell that the width of the swamp was probably about 400 miles. Hence, if she continued traveling in one direction, she could break out from here in about 15 teleportations. Unfortunately, even after she had teleported more than 20 times, she found herself still stuck in the crux of the swamp. The meteorite rain still poured down heavily, and a devil-like whistling sound continued to spook the place. Had they hit a ghost wall? Or was this something more complicated? With Gu Shijio and Di Fuyi's abilities, a ghost wall could not actually trap them. They could easily break through any barrier of that sort in a matter of minutes. Yet this time they were stuck. Because of the earthquake and the constant bombardment of the flaming meteorites, there were very few places where they could actually settle down to think at this swamp. Not to mention that there was rolling magma everywhere and occasional herds of beasts rampaging the land together. It was the end of the world for most of them. The air was heating up so badly that Gu Shijio began to hold her breath. Whenever she took a breath, she felt like she was inhaling a mouthful of dust. It burned her throat badly as well. Di Fuyi's eyes darkened at their current predicament. It appears that he had underestimated Yun Qingluo's insanity. It seemed that when she threatened to bury everyone with her, she really meant it. At the same time, it could be said that the person behind all this madness must be someone very mighty. Little Song, do you recognize this sorcery? Is there any way to break it? Gu Shijio asked the firmament stone on her wrist for help. However, it seemed dead and unresponsive. This bastard always malfunctioned during critical times. Gu Shijio had given up. However, Di Fuyi looked at the firmament stone and suddenly raised his sleeves on the jade bracelet. The firmament stone immediately flashed and shone brightly. Gu Shijio suddenly remembered that she had sealed the 5 senses of firmament stone before entering the illusion to find Di Fuyi. No wonder it did not have any response earlier. After the firmament stone woke up, it was still a bit confused by its surroundings, so it asked a series of questions. Where are we? Is this a meteorite rain? Is this an illusion or reality? Is this the end of the world? Master, I am impressed. You actually saved him. It looks like he is fully recovered. The firmament stone's last remark was said with elation. Gu Shijio was speechless. She seriously doubted whether this guy knew what she did after she entered into the illusion. Or was he a pimp? Anyway, it was naturally not the time to discuss this with it. Gu Shijio was trying to explain the current situation to the firmament stone. Before she could really feed it with some useful information, Di Fuyi had interrupted them. He quickly told the firmament stone about Yun Qingluo. Although it was brief, he seemed to cover all the important points. Finally, he asked the firmament stone, she should have cast a spell in this swamp. Do you have a way to crack it? The firmament stone did not respond, but it started to flash. It looked as if it was searching for relevant information inside itself. After a while, it spoke weakly. This spell seems like a combination of ancient and modern magic. It is extremely complicated to set this up and requires very stringent conditions. The firmament stone began to list everything it knew in detail before it was interrupted by Gu Shijio. I am not interested in how it came about. I just want to know how to crack it. The firmament stone was bothered by her impatience. After I explain the origin of this spell, then you can analyze the appropriate way out. Di Fuyi hugged Gu Shijio. It's all right. Let's speak. Perhaps we can analyze clues from the people behind the scenes from its explanations. Gu Shijio decided to give in and kept quiet while the firmament stone continued. According to the firmament stone, the person who taught Yun Qingluo the spell must be at least close to the level of a great deity, or even slightly above it. It seemed that the culprit had used a spell to bring Yun Qingluo back as a new person, and even transferred some of his skills to Yun Qingluo in the process of teaching her. It was because of this person's support that Yun Qingluo was able to tie her soul to this swamp. Yun Qingluo used this swamp as her last resort to bring her enemies down, and so here they were in this situation. Escaping this place will be impossible without breaking the spell cast by Yun Qingluo. After the analysis from the firmament stone, Gu Zijia's heart sank. Based on what it had said, Zhu Duqing and the rest would not be able to escape either. As she was with Di Fui, they were able to protect themselves from the meteorite rain and lava due to the wizardry barrier that Di Fui had set up to protect them. However, the two guards that came along with them were incomparable to Di Fui, so they would have probably perished by now. As for Mr. Zhu, this guy had some strange skills and magical weapons, but whether he could resist the melting magma was still an unknown. The burning question right now was, who was the person behind all this mess? According to the firmament stone, the magic involved was from a time even later than when Gu Shizhou was born. If Gu Zijia's era was in the year 2018, then this person probably existed in the year 3018, which was indeed a distant future. Perhaps the person behind the scene was someone who could freely travel through time. Having learned some powerful spells from his or her era, the individual probably decided to travel through time and space into the distant future and learned about the powerful spells that existed there. Gu Shizhou frowned. With such an analysis, she felt that this person was somewhat like Long Fan. Her heart sank at the thought, and the more she pondered about it, the more she thought it was true. For example, Long Fan used very modern technology to mix the genes of a human with the genes of a beast in order to create a half-orc. Furthermore, the young palace master, who was a subordinate of Yun Yanli, had once owned a group of half-orcs. Was this a coincidence? Did Long Fan get reborn into this world after his death? Was it possible? She remembered that Long Fan died with his spiritual power at level 9. The person behind the scene was close to or already at the level of great deity. Furthermore, this person seemed to be deliberately targeting the two of them. The strange part of it all was that this person was strong enough to fight with Gu Shizhou and Di Fui. So why would he or she put in so much effort into setting up a trap? Why would he or she be so concerned with hiding in the dark? What was the purpose? This person must know his or her own strength, but seemed to prefer to use other people's knives to take down enemies. What are you thinking? Di Fui looked at her and asked. Gu Shizhou did not want to hide her thoughts from him now, so she told him everything in her mind. Of course, she also stored about Long Fan's past and her previous encounters with him. Some of her memories were somewhat vague because of Huang Tu's presence in them, but she could still remember the general context. Di Fui thought about her revelations for a moment. This seems very similar to the way Luo Jiuqin dealt with the Divine Lord and Great Devil. During that time, Luo Jiuqin was a substitute lord, and he was constantly monitored. He would be punished if he was caught scheming, so he frequently used other people to kill his enemies. Of course, the person we are dealing with this time should not be him. The timing is not right. Both of them analyzed the situation while still in the wizardry barrier. Although they had some clues right now, nothing was certain. Meanwhile, in the vicinity, there seemed to be a sea of magma engulfing the remaining creatures. Breathing the air was rather impossible too. Even the inside of the wizardry barrier had started to become inhabitable. Gu Zijia's low spiritual power could not protect her, so she began to feel a little bit breathless. The two of them had to think of a way to quickly get out of this place, even if they had to pay a high price. In the end, the firmament stone enlightened them with a way out. This method was somewhat ridiculous, however. Devil King, the blood from your heart can break all the wizardry barriers in this world. You may want to try using it, but you will be injured. If it were not the last resort, the firmament stone would not tell them this method. Gu Shizhou frowned. No. She had worked so hard to get him safe and cured. She was not keen to see him injured again. Di Fui thoughtfully looked at Firmament Stone. Are you sure of this? Of course, I am very sure. The Firmament Stone vowed. Di Fui did not say anything more and condensed a sharp and thin knife from his palm. The blade had a groove, and it was somehow similar to the knife which Yin Qingluo used to extract the blood from her heart. He started to take off his robe to start the process. Gu Shizhou was shocked and reached out to grab his hand that held the knife. Don't. Maybe we can find another way. Let's not rush. Di Fui lifted his arms and hugged her. Don't worry. I am confident. He took the opportunity to seal her acupuncture point to avoid her from stopping him. Fu did not want her to see him drawing blood directly from his heart, so after he sealed her acupuncture point, he also covered her eyes with a cloth. Be a good girl. Just give me a moment. He also whispered a sentence into her ears. You will need to take me out later. After Gu's Zygius acupuncture point was sealed, she could not say anything. She could only stand there like a root in the ground. Her heart continued to sink, even though she could not see what was happening. It seemed to be just a moment, but for Gu Shijio, it was like an eternity. Finally, her acupoint was unsealed. She pulled off the cloth on her face and looked at Fui, who was trembling. She was afraid when she saw him stained with blood and seriously injured on the ground. The situation was better than what she had expected. However, aside from his pale face, there was nothing visibly wrong with him. She could see that there were drops on his palm. The blood was purplish red and translucent, as if a circle of Buddha light surrounded it. He did not expect the blood from his heart to be this color. After being stunned for a second, he began to follow the instructions given to him by the firmament stone to make the necessary spell. Following the procedure very carefully, he soon noticed the blood in his palm rising into the air. The blood seemed to crash into the wizardry barrier in the air, and soon, the sharp and fierce woman's laughter suddenly stopped and dissipated unwillingly. After that, there was a green field in the sky not far away, which was the scenery of the grassland outside the swamp. The wizardry barrier was finally broken. Gu Shijio did not dare to waste any time. She grabbed Fui and quickly teleported to safety. Rolling clouds, green grass, and swaying flowers filled the scene. Although this was a rather ordinary sight, having just escaped for the cursed swamp, it was something they truly missed. Gu Shijio and Fui stood in the grass and heaved a long sigh of relief. Finally, they had come out from the barrier. Gu Shijio felt that her legs were a little bit soft from all the commotion. Fui was leaning on her and feeling somewhat lazy to move. Gu Shijio tugged his sleeve. Let me check your injury. She was worried about him. He knew that he could not stop her. Therefore, he did not say anything and untied his robe to reveal the wound on his chest. The wound looked very thin, very unlike being stabbed by a knife. It was more similar to being pricked by a thick needle. It did not look dangerous at all. Gu Shijio looked at his face again and asked, Is it painful? She took out a bottle of ointment and applied it to his wound. Fui smiled as he looked at her. He was happy that she was tending to his injury. This ointment that she used had the effect of regenerating muscles, which was the best for a wound caused by the knife. After she applied it on his chest, the wound started to heal almost instantly. Fui leaned on Gu Shijio and said, Shijio, let's go back to the Devil Kingdom together. Okay. Fui never expected her to answer him so quickly. He thought that she would have a phobia to go back to the devil world. He had even prepared some witty responses to encourage her to put her worries behind. In this case, it was not needed. The girl he loved was always genuine. If she liked him, she would give him her best. Besides, Gu Shijio was always a straightforward person. Hence, if she said she was okay, he could take her word for it. Gu Shijio looked at the swamp again. There was a sea of fire that was clearly visible, but nothing else could be seen. She was worried by that sight. I'm not sure how Mr. Zhu and the two guards doing. Should we go back and look for them? She did not want to leave her friends behind. Before Fui answered, and a door suddenly appeared in the distance, and 3 people fell out at the same time. Gu Zygius shone brightly at the sight. She was overjoyed. The 3 people were Zhu Duqing and the 2 guards. However, 3 of them looked somewhat strange. Their hair was burned, and so were their clothes. There were ashes all over their faces. It looked like 3 of them had just rolled out of the black coal oven. Chapter 24-25. Meeting when the 3 men standing in the distance saw Gu Shijio and Fui, they felt like crying. The 2 guards rushed over and kneeled in front of Fui. My Devil King, it's good that you are safe. Zhu Duqing did not hurry to them, but subconsciously turned his body and put his clothes on properly. He tidied up his hair and even took out a wet cloth to wipe his face. When he turned around again, he looked normal. He smiled at Gu Shijio pleasantly and said, "Master Shijio, I knew that you would be safe." Difui glanced at him and seemed to smile. "I did not expect the three of you to end up together. Zhu Duqing, I thought you said that you would be exhausted once you opened the door again. You look fine now, though." Zhu Duqing smiled. "If it were not your two subordinates, who gave me two of the best pills I have consumed that helped me restore my spiritual power, we would be flying pieces of ash right now. The door I opened before was set to a grassland thousands of miles away. I didn't expect it to lead us back into the swamp. There were tumbling magma everywhere. I had nowhere to run." What he saw was consistent with Gu Shijio and Di Fui's situation. He added, "When I noticed a gap in the wizardry barrier, I quickly opened another magical door so that we could escape." His explanation seemed to make sense while the two guards were also nodding their heads in agreement. So Di Fui dismissed the matter. Zhu Duqing asked, "This swamp had been like a hot pot. We could not find the exit even after we ran in every direction. Our legs could not even run anymore by then. Did you create the exit? How did you do that?" He looked at Di Fui and continued, "You look pale. Are you injured?" Di Fui looked back at him. "Do you actually care about my well-being? Or you are simply curious?" Zhu Duqing waved the goose feather fan in his hand as if he was a fairy. "After all, we are a team. There is nothing wrong for me to be concerned about you, right?" Di Fui did not care about him. He leaned gently on Gu Shijio and ordered his two subordinates, "Go and bring the vehicle over." When they came here, they parked their vehicle outside the swamp. However, it was quite far from here. Guard Jean and Guardian Hua responded to the order and were about to head off. However, Zhu Duqing spoke, "We can take my vehicle. It is nearby." He blew a very long whistle into the sky, and the sound seemed to travel a very long distance. He believed that his donkey would be able to hear it and would come over very soon. Unfortunately, they had waited for half an hour, and he still did not see the shadow of his donkey. Gu Shijio was somewhat puzzled. She knew the skill of the donkey. None of the other creatures on this grassland were a threat to it, and it was generally very reliable. Zhu Duqing felt a little bit uneasy. He blew a whistle again. After a long while, there was a scream in the distance. The voice of this person seemed to signal a hint of anger. Zhu Duqing's facial expression changed. He wrinkled his brows and yelled, "Who detained my donkey?" "It's me." There was a voice in the distance. It was clear and charming. Gu Zijia's facial expression changed this time. She recognized that voice. It was Yin Yanli. He appeared at the scene at lightning speed, which shocked everyone. Di Fui, who had been leaning on Gu Shijio, quickly stood up straight again. Chapter 24-26, Meeting 2. The donkey was behind Yin Yanli. It seemed to be tied or unable to walk properly. When it saw Gu Shijio and Zhu Duqing, it immediately screamed. Its two big eyes blinked for help. Yin Yanli noticed Gu Shijio, and he looked surprised. "Shijio, why are you here?" Next, he glanced at Di Fui with darkened eyes. "Your Highness Nianma." Di Fui flicked his sleeve and smiled calmly. "Your Highness Yin, how are you doing?" Yin Yanli looked conflicted, but very soon he put a smile on his face. "I am good. Where have you been over the past year? Shijio and I have been looking for you. Fortunately, you are alive." His eyes turned to Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua. These two people look like they just came out from a swamp. Their faces are so greasy, though. "Who are they?" "They are Fui's friends," Gu Shijio replied. She then asked, "Yanli, why are you here?" Yin Yanli sighed. "I've been looking for you. I was afraid that you had met with an accident. I happened to pass by the swamp today and noticed that something was odd, so I rushed over. I didn't expect to meet you. It is such a coincidence." His eyes then fell on Zhu Duqing. "I didn't expect Mr. Zhu to be here too." Zhu Duqing proudly smiled. "The world is my home. Why is it so strange to see me here? And why are you giving my donkey a difficult time?" Yin Yanli smiled calmly. "I couldn't help myself. I didn't know that this donkey is Mr. Zhu's spiritual pet. I'm sorry about that. When I came here, I bumped into this donkey. As it was quite special, I had given it an unnatural amount of attention. As a result, it was offended and kicked me. Why are you staring at me? Is there anything wrong for me to stare at you? Bastard, I will kick you if you stare again. Do you dare to kick me? I will lock your legs. Bastard, I doubt if you dare to even come near me. I have my gang. Master, please come help me. That was the conversation between Yin Yanli and the donkey earlier. Yin Yanli lifted his sleeves, and the four hooves of the donkey regained their freedom. It immediately ran to Zhu Duking's side, and then looked at Yin Yanli angrily. Yin Yanli did not care about it. His eyes returned to the swamp. Shijio, did you just get out of there? Do you know what happened in the swamp? I think it was a natural disaster. There appeared to be meteorite-like fireballs falling like rain in there. The creatures inside were all killed. When Yin Yanli and Gu Shijio were separated, he did not know that she already knew everything about him. So when they met again, Gu Shijio continued to pretend as though she did not know anything. She chatted with him like a friend. Moreover, Yin Yanli did not know the identity of the Devil King, and Di Fui did not look the part right now, so Yin Yanli would not be aware of that information. Yin Yanli's eyes slightly flashed. He still had the intention to pursue Gu Shijio. Hence, before his true identity was revealed, he really did not want to offend her. Di Fui's arm hugged Gu Zijia's waist. Shijio, I'm tired. Let's go. Gu Shijio nodded and said goodbye to Yin Yanli. Would Yin Yanli let them go so easily? He smiled and spoke. Shijio, I haven't seen you for a long time. I want to talk to you. He then turned to Di Fui and said, Your Highness Nianma, Mr. Zhu, there are many questions that I would like to ask both of you. Let's go to Lugwa City and have a drink together, shall we? Today is the day that there will be blood rain. Hence, we should go to the city to avoid the rain. Yin Yanli flicked his finger into the air, and a blue light emerged in the sky. In just a brief moment, a large car that could accommodate 10 people seemed to come down from the sky, accompanied by 3 flying horses. There were 4 green-clothed masters in the car. Before the car landed, the 4 men had jumped out of the car. They fell on the ground, without triggering any dust, and bowed to Yin Yanli. City owner, what is the order? Yin Yanli smiled and looked at Gu Shijio. Shijio, Mr. Fui, Mr. Zhu, please. Gu Shijio raised her eyebrows and looked at him. City owner? Have you become a city owner? Which city is it? Yin Yanli sounded calm. Lugwa City. Shijio, I don't want your people to be bullied again in Luo Hua City, so I managed to win the position of the city owner of the Lugwa City. I got your people to Lugwa City 2 days ago, and they have been settling down. They miss you very much. It's good for you to go back and visit them. Gu Shijio remained silent. It seemed like Yin Yanli was using her people to threaten her. He obviously knew her weakness. Yin Yanli was extremely good at martial arts. If she went against his wishes at this time, it would trigger his suspicion. Furthermore, they did not stand a chance against him right now. Gu Shijio was not worried about her own safety. However, she was more concerned for Di Fui, who had just drawn blood from his heart. Although he could still stand, when he leaned on Gu Shijio, she could feel that there was sweat on his body. He was very weak now, and he needed a rest. The 2 guards seemed to be exhausted too. If they really had a battle with Yin Yanli, they could not even last a few rounds. As for Zhu Duqing, he looked like he would collapse at any time. It seemed that their best course of action would be to follow his instructions first and plan how to get rid of him later. As long as they did not strain the relationship with Yin Yanli, they still had the opportunity to leave without a battle. Therefore, she hinted to Di Fui about her plan and responded to Yin Yanli. I see. Thanks for your care. If that is the case, we will just follow you. Di Fui slouched and yawned once he heard Gu Zijia's response. You can invite me to go to the city. However, I am not comfortable sharing the same cabin with other people. Unless you leave this car to me, I will not go together with you. Yin Yanli was speechless. Di Fui laughed casually. Mr. Yin, I think you are not sincere enough with your invitation. Yin Yanli sighed. No. Mr. Fui, please. I still have other cars. He turned to a guard at the side and instructed, Get my silver car here as well. The guard acknowledged his request and immediately whistled. After a while, another car appeared from the air. It was a silver car with a silver horse in front of it that looked very imposing. Yun Yanli was like a peacock that eagerly wanted to open his own gorgeous feathers in front of Gu Shijio. The car that he summoned was more luxurious than the one before. He waved to Gu Shijio. Shijio, I haven't seen you for a long time. Would you take a car with me? I have a lot of stories to tell you. Before Gu Shijio could answer, Di Fui leaned on her more forcefully. Baby, can you stay with me? I have a lot of stories to tell you. He secretly grabbed Gu Zijia's little hand gently. Gu Shijio understood his message. She smiled at Yun Yanli. Sorry, I just found him not long ago. I want to talk to him. When we're back in Lugwa City, I will look for you, and we will talk again. She pulled Di Fui with her and teleported into a carriage. Yun Yanli was speechless. He clenched his fists out of jealousy while his eyes seemed to want to murder someone. He originally wanted to pull a trick on Di Fui if he were traveling alone. He did not expect the man to be so alert to bring Gu Shijio along with him. Since Gu Shijio was present with Di Fui, Yun Yanli was no longer comfortable about his plan to ambush the man during the journey. Besides, there would still be plenty of opportunities now that they had to follow Yun Yanli around. His main concern was to make sure that Gu Shijio was unaware of his evil plan. Yun Yanli turned his attention to Zhu Duqing and asked, Mr. Zhu, would you like to come with me? Zhu Duqing was obviously hesitant to do so. He stammered as he replied, I have my own carriage. There is no need to trouble you. He looked into his sleeve and took out something greenish. With a toss, the ball of green light turned into an emerald bamboo carriage. He attached the cart to the back of the donkey and entered into the donkey-drawn carriage. Yun Yanli studied the two escorts from the Devil Palace. These men had kept a very low profile, so he did not know their identities. Moreover, the two men were not wearing their official uniforms, making it even more difficult to learn of their origin. Yun Yanli was very curious about Di Fui's dealings over the past year that he was missing. The two escorts were the best source of information for Yun Yanli at that moment, so he condescendingly wanted to invite the men to share his ride. However, before he could raise his invitation, Di Fui was already demanding for their presence. Both of you should be here guiding the carriage, right? Do you really think that you are two honorable guests waiting to be invited on board? Therefore, Guardian Jean and his companion gave Yun Yanli a quick gesture of farewell and proceeded to Di Fui's carriage. Yun Yanli's men, on the contrary, were sent away from the carriage by Di Fui. The man had made it clear that he would not trust any strangers to guide his carriage. Yun Yanli was furious by his smart demands. He had left Yun Yanli clueless and with no immediate leads. He tried hard to stay calm in that situation, even though he wanted to smash the carriage into pieces and destroy the man inside it. Yun Yanli's carriage was rather clean and neat. The interior was decorated elegantly. The seats covered were all covered in embellished brocades, while warm carpets filled the floor. There was also a table full of fruits and water. It was a luxurious ride indeed. Di Duyi was half lying on the seat, drenched in sweat. Gu Shijio held his hand tightly to examine his pulse and was shocked by the result. His pulse showed signs that his life was coming to an end. Needless to say, she could tell that the team that retrieving the blood directly from his heart to break through the wizardry barrier had been too excruciating for him. He was so weak that any ordinary man could easily take him down. Fortunately, he could still hold himself upright in front of Yun Yanli earlier. Otherwise, Gu Shijio might have expected Yun Yanli to attack him there and then. Gu Shijio believed that there were two reasons why Yun Yanli did not ambush them earlier. Firstly, she suspected that Yun Yanli would not want to expose his true intention to her. And secondly, he was unsure of Di Fui's strength at that very moment. They had not seen each other for over a year, and any careless act could lead to Yun Yanli's demise. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio was sure that Yun Yanli would surely attack him someday, given how much he despised Di Fui. Fui, I think we should quietly leave this carriage using my teleportation ability, she directed an audio message to him. The carriage belonged to Yun Yanli, so she could not be sure if there were any hidden traps. She did not want to take the risk. Di Fui locked his eyes on her while leaning against his seat. If we leave all of a sudden, he might hurt your people. Gu Shijiu hesitated a little. I'm not worried about them. As long as Yin Yanli and I do not turn hostile, he will not use my people against me for the time being. You are the one who is in the most danger. If he realizes how weak you are, he will surely attack you. You cannot afford to be injured any further. Gu Shijiu truly cared about her people. Although they were not exactly from the same background, they were the ones who nursed her back to health when she needed shelter. She was concerned for their safety and would not wish to see them die as a result of her matters with Yin Yanli. She would do anything to try and keep them safe. She would be willing to risk her life for her people. However, selfishly speaking, Di Fui meant more to her than all of her people combined. Especially because of his current state, she did not want to put Di Fui in danger just because of the villagers. Di Fui knew her well enough to understand her thoughts. He held her hand to reassure her. Don't worry. I know ways to escape. Gu Shijiu finally had a glimpse of hope. Ow! Di Fui pressed his finger against her lips and said, The heavenly secret cannot be revealed. Baby, just do as I say when the time comes. Gu Shijiu could finally heave a sigh of relief. She pushed his hand away and teased, Stop trying to touch me all the time. There could be surveillance devices in here. Delighted, Di Fui twisted her words and said, Does that mean I am allowed to touch you if there are no surveillance devices around? The man would flirt her at every chance that he had. Gu Shijiu ignored him and continued to check every corner of the carriage. Meanwhile, Di Fui was smiling in the carriage. Her actions showed how much she cared for him. There is no need to check. This is Yin Yanli's personal carriage. I know he is a prudent man, but he surely will not put himself under surveillance. It is hard to tell. This man may have come prepared. If he was willing to surrender his personal carriage to us, there might be something here. It is better to look around and be prepared. Like an expert, Gu Shijiu searched the entire carriage thoroughly, not leaving any stone unturned. The result proved that Di Fui was right. There were no surveillance devices in the carriage. She was finally relieved. Lie down. She turned her attention back to Di Fui. Di Fui was caught by surprise. Let me have a look at your injury. She was worried about him and wanted to check his injury earlier, but she was worried that it might reveal Di Fui's weakness to his enemy. Di Fui hesitated. There is no need to check. The wound is fine. When my spiritual power returns, I will meditate and get back to full health. Gu Shijiu could not care less about what he said. She went on top of him and pushed him down. I do not believe what you have said. I need to see it for myself. Di Fui said nothing more. He could not fight with her at that moment, so he decided to stay put and let her do whatever she wanted to do. Baby, are you trying to take advantage of me when I have no strength to resist? He teased. Gu Shijiu took off his robes, so the incident seemed inappropriate. Stop messing around. I have had enough of your sweet talk. Do you really think that I will be fooled so easily? Di Fui was speechless. He was indeed trying to divert her attention so that she would not examine his body. He had underestimated her resolve to make sure that he was all right. Gu Shijiu finally had a clear view of the wound on his chest and gasped in surprise. The wound was not treated at all. In fact, there was a swollen piece of flesh dangling on his chest. The condition explained why he could barely stand on his own. But Di Fui had already applied the best medicines that he had on the wound. Why would it worsen? The wound looks a little gruesome, but it is really not a big deal. Di Fui tried to comfort her as soon as he noticed her pale face. The method he had used to retrieve the blood from his heart would definitely leave a bad wound. To make things worse, he had to support a wizardry barrier around them while attempting to retrieve the blood. The combination of the two was clearly beyond his current capabilities. Furthermore, he even had to use his spiritual power to break the wizardry barrier that Yun Qing Luo had set up to ambush them. It was likely that the poisonous air around the swamp might have infected the wound as well, making it worse than any of them had anticipated. Without sufficient spiritual power, he could not drive the toxins out of his body. Therefore, all he could do at that moment was to endure the pain. Luckily for him, his body was trained to be resistant to toxins. Moreover, He already consumed an antitoxin pill to suppress the effects of the poison. Otherwise, things would have been a lot worse. Chapter 2430. The Purple Cloud Mushroom 3. After a brief examination, Gu Shijio could already assess the extent of his injury. Di Fui, am I not important to you at all? Why are you still trying to look tough, even at this critical point? She complained. Di Fui sighed. I did not want you to be worried. As a proud man, he did not want to be exposed in his moment of weakness in front of his woman. Moreover, he knew he could handle the injury. All he needed was time. Although he was not even 10 years old yet, he was physically and mentally an adult. He wanted to be a man that she could count on. A man should do everything he can to keep his woman away from trouble. On top of those reasons, he definitely did not want Gu Shijio to see him as a child. Therefore, he needed to show her his best self. His character was somewhat different from Celestial Master was from the past. After all, Celestial Master had lived long enough to understand the realities of life. He did not care about anything at all, so he would do anything as he pleased. The teenage Di Fui was still different and cared about how Gu Shijio perceived him. Gu Shijio looked at him intensely and said, "There is no need for you to act so strong in front of me. I will not laugh at you." She started to try to treat the wound. Di Fui found her words somewhat familiar to him. It was like deja vu curious. He started to make some mental calculations. Huang Tu must have been more than 10,000 years old before he was immortalized, and Gu Shijio was only about 200 years old now. Deducting her years in heaven, they must have met when she was only a teenager. A man that old must have found Gu Shijio to be only a child at that age. Di Fui knew how much he cared for Gu Shijio in his previous life. A woman like her, who was both strong and independent, would not ask for his help so easily, so he must have told her the same thing many times before. Their situations now were the opposite of how they were before. He used to be jealous of his previous self, but things were slightly different now. Whether he was Huang Tu or Di Fui, she had fallen in love with him again without any confirmation of his actual identity. Her love for him was genuine. No obstacle could keep them apart anymore. Di Fui was ecstatic by the thought. In fact, he was so happy that he could not even feel the pressure on his wound. He was smiling the whole time. Gu Shijio was using her spiritual power to put pressure on his wound in an attempt to draw the toxic blood out of his body by force. She knew that the process could be quite painful and was worried that he might not be able to take it. Therefore, she was surprised by the big smile on his face. "What are you laughing at? Is this not painful?" How could he not feel any pain? Di Fui answered very seriously, "It is painful. Baby, shower me with love, and it will be all right." Seeing that he was still in the mood to joke around, she believed that he must be able to manage the pain. Therefore, Gu Shijio decided to continue the treatment without any concern. However, having been brought back to reality, Di Fui finally realized that he could no longer take the pain. "Baby, can you be slightly gentle with me? It is painful." Gu Shijio teased him. "It will be better for you if I pushed harder." Fortunately for the man, she did not really mean it, and he could instantly tell that she was gentler with him. The firmament stone suddenly interrupted her during the treatment. I am not overthinking. Gu Shijio was speechless. She raised her arm and sealed away all of the firmament stone's senses. Gu Shijio looked down and caught Di Fui watching her intensely. Her heart skipped a beat. She was undoubtedly left in awe of his charm. She was surprised that he could make her heart race, even without uttering a word. "Shijio! Shijio!" There was a voice coming from behind the carriage. It was Yin Yanli. "What is the matter?" Gu Shijio responded calmly. "Is Prince Nianma all right?" Yin Yanli seemed concerned. He was actually worried that Gu Shijio and Di Fui might teleport away, so he needed to initiate a random conversation with them to make sure that they were still in the carriage. "I am not okay." Di Fui suddenly interrupted. "I am so weak that I am now on the brink of dying. Would you like to come over here and have a look?" His firm and sarcastic tone would have certainly misled any audience about his actual current condition. Yin Yanli gave him an awkward response. "Prince Nianma, you must be joking. Difui simply answered, "Am I?" Yin Yamli felt that the conversation was meaningless. He felt as though the man was mocking him, but could not voice his dissatisfaction. He politely ended the conversation and decided not to talk between the carriages. In fact, he had already set up a small wizardry barrier that surrounded Gu Zijia's entire carriage. If she used her teleportation skill, the wizardry barrier would immediately alert Yin Yanli of the situation. He suspected that Gu Shijio had unraveled part of the truth, and that Difui was severely injured from the events in the poisonous swamp. So the wizardry barrier was actually a test. If Gu Shijio had indeed found out the truth, he believed that she would definitely teleport away with Difui to safety, given Difui's condition. However, instead of running away, Gu Shijio and Difui stayed. Hence, it was safe to assume that they were unaware of his plot. The main problem that he had was that Difui knew exactly how Yun Yanli felt about him. They had an intense discussion the last time they had met. Since Difui did not seem to have the intention to leave, Yin Yanli immediately assumed that Difui must have thought that he was strong enough to fight him right now. Either that, or he must be thinking that Yin Yanli would not dare to touch him in front of Gu Shijio. Did Difui really think that Yin Yanli could not do anything to him because of Gu Zijia's presence? From their brief encounter, Yin Yanli was unable to assess Difui's level of kung fu. Moreover, Difui had refused to show off his strength, so there was no way Yin Yanli could tell how powerful the 10-year-old had become. Before they arrived at their destination, Gu Shijio managed to give Difui a thorough detoxification. She helped him up and asked hoarsely, "How do you feel?" "Much better," Difui reassured. Then he sat with his legs crossed and started meditating. The place was so scarce of spiritual energy, so Difui needed the help of a spiritual stone and some Chinese herbs to restore his spiritual power. The spiritual stone that he currently possessed was a very rare find of the highest quality. Upon absorption, the spiritual stone was able to restore at least a tenth of his spiritual power. However, as the spiritual stone was formed through the ferocious beast's internal alchemy, the stone bore a high level of impurities. Hence, Difui would need to cleanse the stone before absorption, but was too weak to do so this time. Consequently, he required the 1,000-year-old glossy Ganoderma to cleanse the stone. Gu Shijio saw the glossy Ganoderma and was suddenly inspired. She dug in her storage bag and found a small bottle, a red pill that was the size of a red bean rolled onto her palm. She offered it to him. "Would you like to try this medicine?" The pill was produced from the rare purple cloud mushroom and was extremely powerful. Consuming a single pill had the power to increase one's spiritual power tremendously. However, she was worried that Difui might be reluctant to consume it, as he had refused her offer a few times before. Difui studied the pill briefly before graciously accepting it. The pill rolled onto his palm, reflecting light on its shiny surface with every turn. Its faint scent was certainly inviting. Difui was surprised to find that the scent of the pill somewhat reminded him of the scent of his soul. It was a familiar, distinctive kind of smell. "Did Huang Tu make these pills?" he asked. Gu Shijio shook her head. "No, I was the one who made the pills. It was produced from a special type of herb found from the place where I am from." Difui said nothing more and stared at the pill fixedly. Gu Shijio then said awkwardly, "If you are reluctant to take the pill, I can." Before Gu Shijio took the pill back, Difui quickly popped it straight into his mouth. Gu Shijio was astonished that he consumed it. She was now hopeful. "Sit properly. I shall transfer some spiritual power to help you absorb it better." The pill was immensely powerful, carrying a pure source of spiritual power. However, there was something deadly about the pill. It was incredibly difficult to absorb. The source of the spiritual power was so great that once it entered the body of the person who consumed it, it would cause a raging storm that filled every tiny stream instantaneously. One mistake could cost his life. After swallowing the pill, he needed to conceal the power in a bubble and absorb it bit by bit. The pill had to be digested very slowly, so he could slowly absorb its spiritual power. The process was much more complicated than the absorption of a spiritual stone. Usually, the complete absorption of the pill would take at least 6 days and 6 nights. It also required the receiver to meditate and transfer the energy throughout his or her body. It was guaranteed to increase the individual's spiritual power significantly, so the price was definitely worth the trouble. Gu Shijio wanted to wait until they had more time to give him the pill, but desperate times called for desperate measures. It was a risk that she had to take. Di Fui's body had barely any spiritual power left, so he would not be able to use his own power to control and absorb the pill. Thus, Gu Shijio stepped in to help. She knew exactly how the pill would react. Hence, she could certainly facilitate the absorption process. Gu Shijio had briefly calculated the time needed to travel from the swamp to Ligua City. With the speed of the carriage, they would need at least a day. A day was all she needed to help him absorb the pill. Since Gu Shijio offered to help, Di Fui would certainly not be opposed to it. He did as told and sat with his legs crossed in front of her. In sync, they pressed their palms together. Gu Shijio was worried that she might hurt him, so she carefully transferred her spiritual power into his body and slowly traced his veins down to his stomach. She tried to locate the pill. Surprisingly, she could not find it. What had gone wrong? Gu Shijio continued to search his body, but still found nothing. Did you swallow it? I did. Is it stuck in your gullet? Of course not. What is the matter? Di Fui was surprised by the confused look on Gu Zijia's face. It is gone. Di Fui was stunned. Perhaps I have absorbed it on my own? Should it melt away as soon as it passes down my throat? When Di Fui swallowed the pill, he could feel a steady stream of heat slowly go down from his throat to his stomach. He could feel a brief sense of warmth in his stomach before the sensation disappeared entirely. It should be very difficult to digest. When I took the pill, I spent 3 days and 3 nights to absorb its power. Longsai took even longer. He spent 8 days in total. Gu Shijio was very worried. She studied Di Fui's body carefully, as she was concerned that the immense power would crush his veins at any second. To her surprise, Di Fui looked completely normal. In fact, he looked slightly better than how he was before. How do you feel? Di Fui tried to sense the power in his body and shook his head. I don't feel different. Gu Shijio was even more worried now. Under normal circumstances, he should be able to feel the heat in his body within minutes of taking the pill. There should at least be sweat coming out of his face and body. Had the pill lost its effectiveness over time? Or was it on the brink of exploding inside his body? Once activated, it should take over his body like a raging storm. Gu Shijio was in a state of panic. She felt as though she had placed a bomb in his stomach that she could not even locate. She forced him to sit up straight so that she could assess him carefully. Determined, she used her spiritual power and traced every inch of his body to find it. However, the result was the same, fruitless. The pill had disappeared entirely without a trace. Due to this discovery, Gu Shijio decided to stop the transfer of energy to his body, even though she was reluctant. Are you sure that you have swallowed it? She looked at him doubtfully and started to wonder if he was lying to her. Di Fui sighed as he pulled her into his arms. Why would I lie to you? You have to learn to trust me. It is quite abnormal for the pill to have completely disappeared without a trace. Gu Shijio was very confused. Perhaps the pill has lost its effectiveness. To Di Fui's knowledge, it had been more than 200 years since the production of the pills. It could be the case that the pills had simply expired. Gu Shijio was somewhat dismayed by the revelation. It had been a while since she consumed the pill. However, her storage bag had the ability to keep things fresh. Normally, even food could be well preserved for at least 3 to 5 years in the bag. Why would the pills be any different? Was it because of her stay in the Shuro world? There was a period where she lost her kung fu and no longer had access to her storage bag. Perhaps it had lost its ability to keep her food and medicine fresh? Perplexed, Gu Shijio could not figure out why the pill did not work. Di Fui reached out to her and requested, "Give me another one. This time, I will taste it before swallowing it." Gu Shijio was surprised by his eagerness. Did he really think that the pill was some sort of ginseng herb that could be consumed repeatedly? No way. You can only consume one pill at a time. It cannot be overconsumed. Otherwise, its power will crush your veins. The previous one was obviously ineffective. I cannot feel anything at all, so the pill did not work. Maybe the others are still good? We should at least try. Gu Shijiu agreed, but was still curious why the previous pill proved ineffective. She waited for an hour to observe him and could not see any change in his body. She examined his pulse and was sure that he was still doing the same as before. Finally, she agreed to give him another pill. This time, she took the best pill she could find. The pill looked excellent, round as a pearl and smooth as jade. It was gleaming with polish. She took a sniff of the pill and was able to recognize the faint scent around it. She was convinced that it would work this time. She watched Yi Fui intently as he swallowed the pill. She could even see the pill move down his Adam's apple as soon as he swallowed the pill. Yi Fui could not hide his amusement. "Baby, I do not feel very comfortable under your intense gaze. How do you feel?" Gu Shijiu was too worried to entertain him. Yi Fui noticed some differences this time. "My stomach feels quite warm." This was how it should be. It seemed like the last pill was really ineffective and that this one was going to work just fine. Without wasting any time, Gu Shijiu quickly pressed her palms against his and transferred some spiritual power to him. She tried to locate the precious pill in his body. She could finally locate the pill this time, but was quite shocked by the result. In that brief moment, the pill was almost entirely absorbed by his body. From a size of fingernail, it was reduced to almost the size of a green bean, leaving only 1/3 of the pill left in his stomach. At this rate, it would soon be completely digested. As soon as Gu Shijiu came back to her senses, she tried to surround the pill in a bubble, but before she could form the protective layer, the pill was gone. Chapter 2434. The Source of the Spiritual Power 3. Gu Shijiu was astonished. Were his gastric juices abnormally strong? How could the absorption be so swift? What kind of powerful feature did his body possess? If the pill was digested so quickly, the spiritual power of the pill should have been transferred to his body. It should be accumulated at the core of his body by now. Gu Shijiu carefully traced his veins. There was nothing wrong with his blood circulation. Additionally, everything in his system seemed smoothly regulated. However, she was disappointed as she could hardly feel any spiritual power in his body. It seemed that his body was a bottomless pit that managed to absorb the pill and its power along with it. The magical pill that worked wonders for her was obviously ineffective to him. Gu Shijiu stood in a daze, trying to comprehend the situation. Yi Fui was equally confused. "I have had one of these pills before, and it worked very well for me back then. Have they lost their effectiveness in the Shura world?" Suddenly, he was reminded of a past incident. His mother once had a strange encounter where there was a bottomless pit in her body that would swallow all sources of spiritual power almost instantaneously, leaving her body with none. Finally, she found out that it was all because of a sinister being in her body. All of her spiritual power was drained to nourish the growth of the sinister being. Was the same sinister being in his body as well? The scary thought gave him a shudder. He tried to examine his body, but could not find anything odd. Gu Shijiu carefully read his pulse and realized that his condition remained just the same. There was only a slight increase in his spiritual power, which was still very limited. The effect of the pill was even worse than the spiritual stone. Hence, perhaps the most logical explanation was that the pill had lost its power. Gu Shijiu was ready to give up. She kept the pills away, but was abruptly distracted by a sudden scream. "Watch out!" A man called out in a panic. There are so many bloody bats. Quickly, defend." The chaos continued. Soon, the sound of a fierce battle could be heard. Gu Shijiu was utterly surprised by the presence of the bats. These bloody bats would usually come right before the blood rain. Was the rain going to pour any time soon? She flipped the curtain away, and the sight sent a shiver down her spine. A compact, mass of bloody bats surrounded the top of the carriage. They spread themselves around the carriage, blotting out the sky and the sun. The notorious bats dived sharply from high altitudes towards the carriage, as if there was a precious treasure within it that was driving them crazy. There were already more than 70 of these bats approaching the carriage. Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua were fighting them off in a frenzy, killing the bats and turning them into pools of blood. However, there were undoubtedly too many for them to handle at once. Dozens of bloody bats finally found a way through and were likely to collide with Gu Shijio as soon as they approached. Gu Shijio unsheathed her sword. With a few swings, these bats were dead. However, that was just the beginning. A compact mass awaited them in the sky. If they all launched themselves toward the carriage at once, it would certainly spell the end for carriage. The carriage was not a concern for Gu Shijio. It was Di Fui that she was worried about. He barely had any strength left to defend himself. There was no way that he could fend off the bats. The rising sun was just about to shine its first faint streaks of dawn in the east, indicating the start of a new day. Chapter 2435. The source of the spiritual power. 4. The presence of the bloody bats was certainly untimely. Was this all a trick by Yin Yanli? Gu Shijio took a quick look at Yin Yanli's carriage and was further convinced. There were no bats above his carriage, and even Zhu Duking's carriage as well. The bats were only attacking her carriage. Irritated, she was sure that Yin Yanli must be playing a trick on them. Thoroughly annoyed by the situation, she gave her finger a bite to cast an incantation with her blood. A wizardry barrier was immediately formed, surrounding the carriage in a safety bubble. These bloody bats plunged toward the carriage as a loud buzz swept across the sky. Luckily, the wizardry barrier was strong enough to withstand the impact. The barrier shook a little, but did not break. At the same time, Yin Yanli finally emerged from his carriage. He looked confused, as if waking up from a dream. The drowsy look on his face faded as soon as he caught the scary sight. "Shijio," he called out in a panic. Swiftly, he approached the carriage. He seemed eager to help. Zhu Duqing came to help, too. He stood on the top of his donkey-led carriage, summoning countless green stalks to spread across the sky and stop the plunging bats from impacting on the wizardry barrier. Yin Yanli was very fast as well. He made it right through the wizardry barrier and landed on top of the carriage. Those clueless bats were drawn by the man's entry and followed closely. Gu Shijio clenched her fists in frustration. The man did it on purpose. Gu Shijio took a few swings to kill some of the attacking bats before rushing back into the carriage. Yin Yanli was caught by surprise from her sudden retreat, but did not enter with her. He continued to fight the bats. "Shijio, don't worry. I will kill these bats for you," he reassured. He swung his sword quickly and accurately. Many tiny swords seemed to emerge on his blade, making his every attack more lethal. As his kung fu was powerful, the bats were afraid to get any closer. His blue robes fluttered gracefully in the breeze with his every move. It was a rather attractive sight. "Brother Yin, you have such powerful kung fu." He could hear a voice that was accompanied by applause. Surprised, he quickly looked to the source of the voice, only to see Gu Shijio standing on top of his carriage instead of her own. She was smiling and cheering for him. Apparently, Gu Shijio had teleported with Di Fui into Yin Yanli's carriage. Di Fui sat uncomfortably in the wagon and was looking at Yin Yanli with added interest. When their eyes met, Di Fui smiled at Yin Yanli and said, "Thank you, Mr. Yin." Yin Yanli was speechless. Meanwhile, the bats seemed to have lost interest in the carriage as soon as the two of them had moved out. After a long, fruitless struggle, the bats finally left, and the carriage was left unharmed. Fortunately, Guardians Jean and Hua were only slightly injured. The bloody bats were actually very poisonous. A bite or a scratch was already enough to cause them harm. Nonetheless, thanks to the long-lasting effect of the antitoxin in their bodies, they were both fine and only suffered some minor scratches. "Shijio, are you all right?" Yin Yanli returned to his carriage and asked keenly. "I'm fine, more traumatized than hurt." With a smile, Gu Shijio continued. These bats were obviously scared of you. They ran away as soon as you approached. It was evident from her tone that Gu Shijio was very scornful. Hesitantly, Yun Yanli stared at her with a serious expression. Shijio, did you suspect that I was the one who summoned the bats? Gu Shijio denied his accusation. I did not. It was true that she did not suspect that he had caused the commotion. She was sure that he did. However, she could not point that out. She could not risk shedding all the pretenses at this time. Yin Yanli turned his attention to Di Fui instead. Mr. D seemed at ease, even in such a dangerous moment. He did not see Di Fui helping Gu Shijio earlier. Di Fui confidently flicked his sleeves. You are right. If I helped, I would not be able to witness your charm. Yin Yanli did not know what to answer. Soon, Di Fui and Gu Shijio returned to their carriage. The reason for doing so was that Mr. D was obsessed with hygiene. He had just cleaned the wagon, so he was reluctant to switch. What frustrated Yin Yanli the most was Gu Zijia's unquestioned submission towards Di Fui's every request. When he asked to return, she willingly agreed and followed him back to the carriage without questioning his intentions. Yin Yanli was very annoyed but did not dare to act at this moment. The incident was finally over, and all the carriages continued their journey. Yin Yanli looked at the carriage before him and was puzzled. He did not summon the bloody bats. They appeared on their own. However, he knew about the characteristics of the bat. These bats were able to tell when an immense source of spiritual power appeared. They were attracted to spiritual power like flies are attracted to garbage, and could easily track the source within miles. He once used the bats to find sources of spiritual power, and they never let him down. The stronger the spiritual power, the more bats one could expect to be present. The scary part was that he had never seen so many bats going after one source of spiritual power before. Obviously, Gu Shijio and Di Fui possessed a strong source of spiritual power. They must have revealed some of their spiritual power by accident, thus attracting the bloody bats. Finally, the bats left as soon as they kept away their spiritual power. What was the source of the spiritual power that they had? Di Fui was the son of a celestial being and a devil. The divine couple clearly adored him, so they must have given him a lot of magical items. One of the items he was carrying must be the source of the spiritual power. That would explain how Di Fui was able to show up again after his disappearance for so long. He even had the ability to destroy the entire poisonous swamp that had encountered a catastrophe. Perhaps he had passed through some adventures and acquired an immense source of spiritual power. Di Fui was known to be a man of wicked plans, torturing his enemies with no mercy. Yin Yanli thought that it was all a plot. Otherwise, Di Fui would not stand aside, even when his life was at stake. He would not leave Gu Shijio alone in such a situation. He appeared to be a little weak as well. Was Di Fui presenting a bold front to conceal something? Or was he only acting to lure Yun Yanli into action? A sudden realization occurred to Yun Yanli, which made him believe that he had a grasp of the entire situation. Yun Yanli was convinced that Di Fui revealed Yun Yanli's intentions to Gu Shijio, but she refused to believe his theory, so he wanted to make Yun Yanli launch the first attack to prove that he was right. Di Fui had pretended to be weak on purpose and flirted with Gu Shijio sweetly just to tempt Yun Yanli. Everything was a show just to trigger him to attack. Yun Yanli was not a man who would fall for such a trap. With a smug look on his face, Yun Yanli decided to enter Zhu Duking's carriage. He wanted to see if he could get any information from the man. The carriage that Di Fui and Gu Shijio rode was not badly damaged. There were some stains on the curtains and some holes every here and there, but overall, it looked fine. Di Fui changed the curtains into new ones that were even better than what Yin Yanli had for them earlier. He changed a few other items and threw the old ones out. Yin Yanli's men were not on the same carriage, but they could clearly see him from behind. All of them frowned with dissatisfaction by his action. Di Fui, how could you? They were very unhappy with Di Fui's actions and found him too arrogant. He He was too disrespectful to the governor, the men thought. Yin Yamli came out his carriage and saw exactly what Di Fui was doing. However, he was not quite bothered. With a smile, he proceeded to Zhu Duking's carriage as planned. His smile clearly showed that he would not fall for his trap. Di Fui could annoy him as much as he wanted, but he was not going to give him the chance to convince Gu Shijio. Yin Yamli's men looked at one another in consternation. If the governor was unbothered, perhaps they should not care about it too. Therefore, everyone pretended that they saw nothing. Gu Shijio looked at the carriage that had taken on an entirely new look. Di Fui had publicly removed every piece from Yin Yanli. It is not the time to trigger Yin Yanli. Are you sure that he will not be irritated by your little affectations? She was quite puzzled by Di Fui's intention. Di Fui let out a graceful smile as he explained confidently, "Don't worry. The more I behave so, the more unlikely he will attack. He must be thinking that I'm doing all this to irritate him and trigger him to act out of exasperation, thus revealing his true self in front of you." Gu Shijio said nothing more. She knew that Di Fui was indeed a man with a plan. More accurately speaking, he was a child with a plan. She observed him and was relieved to see that his complexion had slowly returned. It seemed like the purple cloud mushrooms were useful after all. She then proceeded to read his pulse and could immediately tell that there was a strong flow of spiritual power circulating in his body. Delighted, she quickly put him down on the cushion and examined the open wound on his chest. The wound was starting to heal, and everything seemed to be going right. It was indeed a great sign. Relieved, she looked up and caught Di Fui gazing at her. There was a complicated look in his eyes as he stayed still and well-behaved. "Why are you looking at me like that?" She then helped him put his robes back on properly. Di Fui pulled her close and lay her down on his body. "I thought you were going to do something dirty to me. You have overthought." She decided to offer him the entire bottle of purple cloud mushroom pills. "I can see that your complexion is slowly returning and that your wound is healing just fine, which proves that my pills are working. Would you like some more?" Di Fui planted a soft kiss on her forehead. "Do you have many of these pills?" He was perplexed by her generous offer. "Unfortunately, I don't. These pills are very precious. I have only encountered these purple cloud mushrooms once in my entire life and collected them all. I tried to find these mushrooms again, but my efforts were in vain." She had offered him the entire bottle without any hesitation. "Are you giving all of the pills to me?" Yes, Gu Shijio did not hesitate. She always felt that these pills belonged to him. Giving him the bottle was only a gesture of returning something that was always meant to be his. Her kind offer touched Di Fui. He took a careful look at the content of the bottle. There were about 50 or 60 pills left. Each pill was encircled in a glistening layer of purple light that made it look as though it was glowing. Di Fui took about half of the bottle and returned the rest to Gu Shijio. "It will be a waste if I take them all. You should keep the rest. These pills will probably help you as well. When there is time, I will cover you while you slowly take these pills and meditate." Gu Shijio thought about his proposition before accepting the bottle. All right. She knew that she needed to restore her spiritual power as well. These pills would surely work for her. When she had regained her memory, she had thought about consuming the pill to restore her power. However, there was hardly any time for her to rest and meditate. Di Fui proceeded to swallow a dozen pills at once. Like before, these pills melted away in his stomach almost instantaneously. But this time, Di Fui could finally feel the warm sensation in his veins. It was a rather pleasant feeling. The wound on his chest did not hurt quite as much after the pills had dissolved in his stomach. Meanwhile, a warm stream of energy circulated his entire body, making him feel as if he had soaked his body in a hot spring. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.